Welcome to another edition of the Ultimate Weigh-In Show. I am your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, and your boy on Twitter at MMALOTN. This week we're going over UFC Vegas 30, headlined by a pivotal heavyweight scrap between Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov. Really excited to see how this fight plays out, and we really get to find out how true and how skillful Cyril Gane truly is, because this is definitely his stiffest test to date. So I really can't wait for this one to go down. As always, I do have some friends that I've brought along with me to break these fights down, and I'll introduce them to you guys very shortly. Obviously, we do have PFL and Bellator going on in the background. Some of us got some degenerate plays that we're trying to sweat out over here, so we're all going to sweat it out together, and I'm sure some of you guys in the chat are going to be watching as well. So the main focus, though, we'll be watching that in the background, but the main focus is going to be breaking down UFC Vegas 30 one last time for you guys, especially now that we have the weigh-ins that actually occurred this morning. Everybody made weight, no big issues, so I'm really looking forward to seeing how this one plays out, and I can't wait to hear what these guys have to say as well. So first and foremost, let me bring in my guy Jonas Schiffman, probably the one that I'm most familiar with throughout out of this entire panel. But my guy Jay Schiff, he knows what the hell he's talking about. What's going on, my brother?
What's up, Locke? Thank you for having me on the show. I know we've done some work together before on the YouTube streets. I was honored to be featured in that big episode you did back in the day where you had all the guest speaker on for each fight. I think I did a Nathaniel Wood fight, if I remember correctly. Helwani
Yes.
came on at the end, and you've blown up even more since then. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on, man.
Absolutely, brother. You know your shit, so I have to give you a fucking platform. And I know I didn't get to you sooner than I did the rest of the guys. I even got your co-host on before you, but I still definitely had your name on the list of guys that I want to tackle to especially get on this type of show. But yeah, I appreciate you carving out time to hop on the 100th episode, and obviously this one as well for Friday night. All right, let's bring on next up, host of the, I believe, the UFO podcast, John, my man John Martian can actually say it himself. John, what's going on, brother?
What's up, fellas? Yeah, the Martian MMA podcast. That's where you guys hear me from, but I'm interacting with all you guys on Twitter. I know Locke's been grinding, doing 6-7 podcasts a week. I struggle to do one podcast a week, so I don't know what this man is made of, but he's been grinding them out. I'm happy to finally be on the show, and we got a decent card tomorrow, so it should be fun discussing it.
Absolutely, brother. John, trust me, I've been seeing you around the Twitter streets. I've been seeing your podcast and all that type of stuff. So I'm glad that we're finally able to collaborate on something, and I can actually give you a legitimate platform to go out there and showcase your skills for the rest of the audience as well. So if you guys don't know, you guys will definitely know these fellas before we wrap this show up. Lastly, somebody that I just recently came across and was very impressed with, we got my guy Uncle Weezy. Weezy, what's going on, brother?
I'm ready to break down some fights with all you guys tonight, man. UFC 30, we got 13 fights, man. I am kind of new to this game, but I'm old to the stats game. So I've been compiling mixed martial arts statistics for the last year because I was pissed off about how shitty the stats were on DraftKings when I was researching those cards. And it just kind of built into something where all of a sudden I've got a ton of stats. I've organized them. I'm ready to go through them with you guys. I watch tape too. I'm not a guy that just looks at the stats and uses just the stats to come to conclusions. So, let's talk some stats. Let's talk some tape. Let's talk some fights, man. I'm ready to go.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. You guys can find Uncle Weezy. I believe he's on the Early Look podcast with Brady, DFS by the numbers over there on Pub Sports Radio. I definitely have seen Weezy creeping up in the chat and every now and then on my streams and stuff. And then once I saw him over there on that stream at Pub Sports Radio, I knew I had to give the guy a shot on this show. So hopefully you guys are enthused and happy with what he brings to the table in terms of stats. So very good crew of guys that we got here to look at all these fights from different angles. And I'm sure we're going to have some guys butting heads in terms of picks, but hopefully we can get some solid takes, solid reads that could end up with some cash in your pockets tomorrow night. And just a reminder, early card tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern start time for the prelims, 4 p.m. Eastern start time for the main card. So don't get caught snoozing, because that's usually my nap time as well. So I'm getting my ass up to make sure that I'm watching these fights. All right, let's not waste too much more time. Let's start off at the bottom of the card here. We got a fight that was supposed to happen early last month, I believe. Jaynes Medeiros versus Damir Hadzovic. In terms of odds, we're looking at minus 140 for Damir Hadzovic, plus 120-ish on Jaynes Medeiros. Not much action on this line this time that they were actually scheduled. The last time they were scheduled, I believe it was closer to a pick'em, and we did have we did have Damir actually come in as roughly about a -120 favorite on fight day before the fight actually ended up getting canceled. Now, I'm having a little bit of a tough time reading this fight, but I ultimately still come out on the Damir Hadzovic side of things. I believe Yancey really needs to implement his grappling advantage here in this fight, but I don't think that he's going to be able to do it efficiently enough to get Damir Hadzovic down. And, there are times where Hadzovic looks like a fish out of water. There's been plenty of fighters that have been very successful in dragging him there. Hanato Moicano, Alan Patrick are two guys, even Christos Yagos, who had a lot of success in terms of just grapple fucking Damir Hadzovic. I just don't think that Yancey will have the same type of success. I think that this will eventually just turn into a striking contest, which I actually give the advantage to Mr. Damir Hadzovic. Better combinations, more power, seems to have a little bit more sauce, if you want to call it that, on the feet. I think that he's definitely going to put it on Yancey here. I've seen some people on the violence bet here, the under 2.5, and I don't hate it because it is at slight plus money, but I ultimately do think it's going to be Damir Hadzovic who gets his hand raised, knocking out Yancey Medeiros. And yeah, I'm a big Yancey fan. It hurts for me to say that, but I don't think that this is a good stylistic matchup, especially if he can't get his grappling going here. So I'm going Hadzovic, and a Hadzovic by second round KO. John, I'm going to shift it on over to you. Damn, I didn't even try to do that. That just happened. I'm going to shift it on over to you. How are you feeling about this matchup between Medeiros and Hadzovic?
You're just too slick with those transitions, Block. Basically, I think you captured the breakdown pretty well in terms of, I think if it plays out as a striking match for 50 minutes, I do favor Hadzovic. I do think that Yancey has some submission upside here. I actually did make a bet. I think I have 6 plays for this weekend. This is my first one. I played the under 2.5 at plus 150. Man, Preet, you mentioned in your breakdown how, we saw this line was close to a pick 'em. Then Hadzovic took some money prior to the fight getting canceled a few weeks ago. I was contemplating playing the under 2.5 at around even money last time out. And then this week, it was plus 150 earlier in the week. Wow. And, I don't love betting on betting violence in a spot where I don't see there's like a clear favorite between Hadzovic and Medeiros. But I kind of like the fact that, either one of them can land a finish. We've seen them both knocked out inside the UFC. Yancey has not looked great recently. In fact, that's kind of my one hesitation with the under is like that Venata fight. He just didn't seem like that same War Yancey we've seen, who's really been an under machine. But in terms of how the matchup plays out in a pick, I'd like to pick Yancey. He's faced better competition. He's been in there against, Jim Miller, Dustin Poirier, guys like that. I'm just not sure what kind of Yancey we get come Saturday, I guess, afternoon at this point. So I guess if I had to pick a side, I'll take the dog money in Yancey. But really, I think the under early in the week at plus 150 was good. Either guy live for a knockout, kind of defensively irresponsible both ways. And I think Yancey has some sneaky submission upside as well.
Yeah, John. So Yancey Medeiros, I believe back in 2016, 2017, was on a pretty solid 3-fight winning streak. Sean Spencer, Eric Silva, Cowboy Oliveira, and then he runs into Cowboy Cerrone in a main event slot, ends up losing, and that starts a 3-fight losing streak. You got to give him a mulligan a little bit for that Gregor Gillespie loss that he took. But here he is against Hadzovic, trying to not take that 4th straight loss. His job is more than likely on the line here. Do you think he actually pulls off the upset and saves his job, or do you think that Hadzovic actually gets him out of there?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much agreeing with everything that's being said so far. I do see the angle on the under, Yancey sub, Damir knockout. And I don't really have like a concrete idea of how the finish is going to happen, but it kind of reminds me of Glenn and Silva last week, where it's just two kind of volatile guys and the finish could easily happen. And I really agree with Locke's breakdown. I just got to side with the striking of Hadzovic. I think he's got the more consistent boxing. And Medeiros is just kind of noodly on the feet, like he doesn't really know what he's doing at times. I wasn't impressed with the Lando fight, as Jonah mentioned. He just didn't really want to push the action there. He was kind of content to lose a decision, and that just wasn't a good sign. I mean, when was the last time the guy won a fight at lightweight too? Like 6 or 7 years ago. You got to like Yancey Medeiros. He's a cool guy, but it is hard to pick him in this spot. But if he comes in with the right grappling game plan, he hasn't been the guy to do that in the past, but with the tape on Damir struggling off of his back, it would be the right game plan to come in here. So no bets for me on this one. I kind of would like to see Yancey pull off the upset, but the pick for me is going to be Damir. I'm going to go with decision, but I like that knockout pick you got there, Locke.
Yeah, for sure. And it is the last time we actually saw Yancey Medeiros pick up a win in the lightweight division was against John McDessie way back at UFC 194. Last time and only time I've ever actually been to Vegas for the Aldo McGregor card. So I'm hoping to turn the fortunes around and actually hit Vegas up either this year or next year. But regardless, Uncle Weezy, give us those stats in regards to this matchup and who ultimately do you think ends up getting their hand raised this weekend?
Yeah, what's really important about the stats for this particular fight is we can look at Damir Hadzovic's takedown defense. It's 39%, which is terrible, okay? So he's going to get taken down basically anytime somebody tries to take him down. But the problem with that is that Yancy Medeiros in 14 UFC fights has only attempted 4 takedowns, and he's only gotten 1, okay? So the easiest plan to beat Damir Hadzovic is to take this dude down, lay on top of him, eventually get a sub. We've never seen that from Medeiros, really, in the cage. He's got 1 takedown in 14 fights. So that makes me real buoyant on Hadzovic here, because if this guy is going to be standing the whole time, one of the things that really sticks out about Medeiros is a 46.83% striking defense, right? That's not good at all. It means he's getting hit constantly, and we've seen it. We've seen it in Yancy's career. This guy gets knocked down a lot. He gets knocked out. He can take a beating. He is super tough. But both of these guys have power. Yancy Medeiros lands a knockdown in about 2% of the significant strikes that he lands, and Hadzovic lands it on 1%. Now, that's both very good for lightweights and welterweights. But the problem is that Yancy's a lot more chinny, and it's because he's a lot more hittable. Yancy Medeiros' striking defense is 46%, but Damir Hadzovic is 66%. Now, that's a huge gap there. So we see that Hadzovic is way better defensively on the striking side. He brings power, not as much power as Medeiros, but Medeiros is also shown to be a lot chinnier. So I'd be a lot more confident on Medeiros' ability to be able to use his power if he was going to mix it in with his grappling. But, since he doesn't really grapple, I see Hadzovic being better defensively. I see him being more accurate when he does land strikes. And Yancy Medeiros has got a big problem that he only lands about 4 significant strikes per minute, but he absorbs 5.66. And that's just it's a function of that defense, which just hasn't been there. So I'm definitely leaning Hadzovic here. Medeiros is super tough. It's going to be really hard to knock him out. So I don't really have an opinion on the over-under on this one. I could see it ending early. I could see it going the distance, but I am going to lead Hadzovic here. I would probably pick him by decision.
All right. I like it. John, go ahead, brother.
One thing I'll say about the stats differential between these two is the fighters that Hadzovic has fought are mostly grapplers. If you look down the list, Held, Patrick, Hein, Yagos, Moicano. So that's why you probably see the striking defense numbers a little bit better. And I think you got to give Yancy a little bit of benefit of the doubt, because the guy's actually had a pretty tough strength of schedule over his UFC career. So I think you match Hadzovic up with those same guys, and his striking numbers or defense is the same or lower. So I don't think the striking defense statistics will play too much into this, but I do still think that Hadzovic is going to be outboxing him. So I think you got the read right.
Perfect. I love it. All right, let's move this train along. A fight that's been getting a lot of talk over the last at least 24 to 36 hours is Justin Jaynes against Charles Rosa. We got Justin Jaynes apparently wagering $25,000 on himself. We'll see if that actually comes through for him this weekend. In terms of odds, we're talking about minus 165 for Charles Rosa, plus 145-ish for Justin Jaynes. And I'm actually going to let my guy Jonah kick this one off for us. Jonah, how are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, I wish I had a take as strong as Justin Jaynes is on his self-belief here with the $25,000 bet. I just don't. I think that this is pretty easily a pass for me. You look at Justin Jaynes, I think it's pretty clear to me that he is not a UFC level fighter. No disrespect once the fight leaves that first round. It's just the honest truth of what we've seen inside the octagon, outside the octagon too. I mean, this guy has not won a fight that left round 1 since 2017. And it's not like that's an anomaly. You watch his fight and you look at the tape, and it's because of his style. He will come out and throw hooks pretty much as hard as he can, looking to hurt his opponent. And, theoretically, he has a decent wrestling game. Like, I do think he could see some top control here against Charles Rosa. But I also am just not comfortable betting a guy who I think a bulk of his win condition comes in round 1 via knockout. And then on the other side with Charles Rosa, it's like, I've always thought he was a little bit underrated, and like his style of just point fighting on the outside has kind of allowed him to stay in fights. But we've seen recently in both the Bryce Mitchell and Derek Minner fights where he's just had nothing off his back. And, I know he has submitted Manny Bermudez before. I know that he's a capable BJJ player, a well above average one. But in terms of MMA grappling, I feel like Rosa is just way too content to be on his back. And it could be one of those situations where Jaynes goes all out for the finish in round 1, doesn't get it, and shoots a weak takedown in round 2 and could still be on top for 2, 3, 4 minutes. And then things get really sketchy when you're laying a -170 price on Charles Rosa. So for me, it's a pass. I think Rosa is clearly the better fighter in terms of actual skill. I think he probably covers this number and then some. It's just hard to bet on a guy who has shown the susceptibility to get stuck on his back so much against someone who could theoretically wrestle in this spot. But I got Rosa. I just think he's the better fighter. I just don't want to lay that type of chalk on him at this point.
John, how are you feeling about the big ass balls that Justin Jaynes has in terms of throwing the 25K on himself? And then ultimately, how do you see this fight playing out?
Yeah, I sent out a tweet calling a little bit of cap on that. I think that it's possible that he puts some money, but I mean, where's this guy getting 25,000 from? He probably got paid like 25,000 his whole UFC career so far. One thing I'll say about Jaynes is I think this is his easiest UFC opponent to date, right? I think we can agree on that because the guy came in, Camacho, Devontae Smith, Gavin Tucker, Benitez, all good fighters, and this is kind of a step down, a pretty hefty step down, and I do have a lot of concerns over Jaynes. I mean, it doesn't feel good having the money on the guy, but at plus 150, I still think he's the side. And over some of Jonah's concerns about round one, Derek Minner, I think, also has about like 80% of his wins in round one. And a lot of people were probably hesitant on playing Minner, but then he ended up being fine in rounds 2 and 3. So I just think Rosa is so far past his prime and has a lot of weaknesses that plus 150, I still think there's value there. And I don't disagree with the small bet on Jaynes at all. In terms of an official pick for this one, I really struggle, but I got to go with Jaynes. Round one knockout is possible. That's his most likely path to victory, but I think he could even get enough work done in the first 2 rounds to win a decision here. Round 3 is going to be sketchy, but I'm siding with Jaynes by either knockout or decision.
All right, Weezy, let us know what your thoughts are on this fight between Jaynes and Charles Rosa.
This one, it's going to be a pass for me. We haven't seen much of Jaynes. 4 fights in the UFC cage, but the average fight time is only 6.28 minutes. So, I mean, he went out there and he just starched Camacho, and then, Tucker subbed him, Benitez knocks him out, Smitty knocks him out. And, those are all really good opponents. I mean, Tucker, Benitez, and Smith is really tough for a guy who's got 1 UFC fight. That's kind of a murderer's row for a newbie. And then Rosa, he's got that great grappling game. Really is known for his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. I mean, the fact that he subbed Manny Bermudez is a major feather in his cap. I have to lean Rosa here just because I haven't seen enough of Jaynes at this level to kind of formulate what his path to victory here is. I know he's a good wrestler, and I know that Rosa has struggled with wrestling in his last couple of fights, especially that Bryce Mitchell fight. And then Minner just really wrestle fucked him too. So, if Jaynes, being one of the wrestling coaches over at Extreme Couture, and now that he's got a full camp for this fight, maybe there's a path to victory for him from wrestling, but I haven't seen it yet at the UFC level. And if he does try to get down on the ground with Rosa, he's going to be playing with fire because Rosa's a black belt and he's got some slick submissions. And I don't think that Jaynes's offensive grappling is on par with Mitchell and Minner. Those guys are really tough submission artists. Jaynes, we know he's more of a lay and pray, ground and pound, control the cage type of wrestler. So I got to lean Rosa here, but I just don't really have a strong lean either way. A lot of talk about Jaynes putting all that money on himself, but I try to not pay attention to that stuff too much. So yeah, I'm going to lean Rosa here with not a lot of confidence, and I don't really even have a lean on the over/under either.
All right. Well, it seems like there's a lot of people out there that are picking Rosa, but just picking him for the sake of picking him. But I feel like I'm on an island here in terms of the confidence level in which I have on Charles Rosa, because I do believe in him. And I think he is a really good spot here. Now, some people might scoff at me in terms of thinking that I'm actually placing him at 80% in this fight, willing to bet him, all the way up to the minus 300s, minus 400s in this spot. And I think that there's a lot of people that are just on the buy low side on Charles Rosa here. I think it's truly due to the last 3 fights, right? He's 1-2 in his last fights. 1-2 in his last 3 fights. One of those coming against Kevin Aguilar, which stylistically speaking, I think is similar to this Justin Jaynes fight. But I do think that Kevin Aguilar is a much better version of what Justin Jaynes brings to the table outside of the wrestling skills that Justin Jaynes brings to the table. The other 2 things regarding the Bryce Mitchell and Derek Minner fights, Uncle Weezy was on the nail here in terms of the level of jiu-jitsu jiu-jitsu capabilities of those guys is far surpassed what Justin Jaynes brings to the table here. So I think if Justin decides to go out there and wrestle fuck Charles Rosa and tries to take a page out of Derek Minner's book or Bryce Mitchell's book, he's going to find himself in a sub. I don't think he has the cardio to control Charles Rosa or deal with the offensive nature of Charles Rosa off of his back. Now, even though Derek Minner was able to just, again, kind of grapple fucking for 15 minutes, he was dealing with arm bars and triangles coming up at him pretty much every couple seconds. Like, he was not able to settle on top. And I'd be very surprised if Justin Jaynes finds much success in terms of staying on top if he decides to go the wrestle fucking route. Now, if he goes out there and just tries to wing bombs, and obviously we know that he's always live for a first round knockout, just ask Frank Camacho. But I still think that Charles Rosa only ever one knockout loss on his record to Shane Burgos, who he was lighting up for about 2 rounds up until that 3rd round. And then also, he's gotten dropped 3 times in the UFC. Another one that people always want to point to, obviously leading up to this fight, was the one against Derek Minner. I'm going to be completely honest. I think a lot of people, even Charles Rosa himself, would admit this. He was probably underestimating the striking skills of Derek Minner, thinking that he was just trying to get this fight to the ground. So I think he'll give Jaynes a lot more respect. You see when he's in his southpaw style, people say that he likes to keep his hands down low. And his southpaw style is when you see his Wonder Boy-esque style, where he's in that karate stance. When he's in the orthodox stance, you see him in more of a conventional boxing stance. And I think that's what he'll probably be using here in terms of trying to be prepared for whatever is going to be coming his way regarding the power of Justin Jaynes. So, I feel very similar to when I had the money on Gavin Tucker against Justin Jaynes, and surprised that the public actually even bet Justin Jaynes to a favorite in that fight. And yeah, it got a little bit hairy in that first round. Don't get me wrong, but Gavin Tucker was able to get through that, and and then obviously take over in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, finding that finish. I think Charles Rosa survives that first round and then starts getting the body work going, great kicks up the middle, great kicks to the body, starts sucking the gas tank out of Justin Jaynes, and then starts to open up a little bit more, maybe lands a takedown of himself. But I think he's ultimately going to find the win via submission here. And I think that it's just going to be very tough for Justin Jaynes to keep up with that, with what Charles Rosa is going to be throwing at him. And then obviously the submission onslaught that's going to be coming his way as well too. So yeah, I feel like I'm on an absolute island because people are just all over Justin Jaynes for some reason over the last 24 to 36 hours, especially after he dropped that betting on himself thing. He looks in great shape. Don't get me wrong. We're here to talk about the weigh-ins as well. Look great at the weigh-ins. I thought he looked the same that he did in the Gavin Tucker fight, to be honest. That was the only other time he's been down at 145 in the UFC. So yeah, he's going to look a little bit more cut up and stuff. But I still don't think it's going to be enough. Jonah was on the head here as well in regards to, I don't think that Justin Jaynes is UFC caliber. He is not, and I think that he's the definition of a KO or bust type of guy. His cardio is not going to hold up here either against Charles Rosa. So I'll quit blabbering my mouth off here, but I'm pretty big on Charles Rosa in this spot. -175. I was more than happy to take that shot. I will say, my biggest play was going to be Ramazan Emeev against Warlley Alves, but Ramazan Emeev unfortunately had to pull out, and then the next spot down for me was Charles Rosa, and I had to unload on that. So I might be looking like a complete dumbass come Saturday afternoon, but I do think that I have a very good edge in this spot, at least the way that I'm looking at it. And I'm taking Charles Rosa by finish. The sub prop is around +200. I think that's a decent spot too, as I think he can get the finish here. All right, let's move on to the next fight. We got Julia Avila versus Julia Stoliarenko. This was a fight that was supposed to take place in March as well. And it's the infamous moment. A lot of people remember Stoliarenko steps on the scale and then falls into the backdrop and just has a very brutal scene at the weigh-ins there. They obviously call off the fight, and now they're scheduled 3 months later. I'm actually going to let John kick this one off. In terms of odds, we got -345 on Avila and roughly around +300 for Stoliarenko. John, how do you see this women's, I believe it's bantamweight scrap, going down? And do you think the underdog, the heavy underdog, has any value in this spot?
I'm not sure if I would say that Stoliarenko has value, but I certainly wouldn't bet Avila -350, mostly just because if she ends on her back at any point in this fight, I think -350 is going to be a bad bet. And, you know, she did get taken down and put on bottom by Eubanks, and I do think there's a massive difference between the grappling of Eubanks and Stoliarenko, but I still think that Stoliarenko could get a trip, a takedown of some sort, and I don't think she's going to have a lot of grappling success, prolonged success, because most of her grappling wins are like arm bars off of her back. But still, Avila -350 for the possibility of her losing an entire round off of one takedown. I'll pass on that. But I'm down to stab on the Avila knockout prop. I bet this earlier in the week at +340. Mostly just because I think that Stoliarenko is kind of a punching bag on the feet. She doesn't really see the punches coming well. She doesn't move her head, and she takes a lot of damage. I mean, she had that one Invicta War where the entire cage was covered in blood. But she's very tough. I think that not calling her a quitter or anything, but I do think that Avila could connect with some punches, and Stoliarenko might shell up, and it might be like kind of a Gina Mazzani type of finish here if Avila can lay some hands on her early. So dog or pass money line wise, but I do think Avila is gonna get that boxing knockout here pretty early on in the fight.
I like it, John. I think that this is definitely one of those crafty plus money under spots that people should actually be looking at and maybe taking a shot on. Wheezy, how are you feeling about this match? Oh, I can't wait to get over to Jonah because I think he might actually have a play here. Wheezy, though, let us know what your thoughts are on this fight.
Yeah, man. Avila's tough. I mean, when she gets somebody hurt, she really goes all out for the finish, and she hits super hard. You don't see a whole lot of power in the women's divisions, but Avila's definitely got that power. And then on the other side, you got Stoliarenko, who's basically, she's a one-trick pony. She's got 9 professional wins, and 8 of them are by submission, and all 8 are by armbar. So this is one of those things that it just feels like a really, really wide line. I mean, you're giving up a lot of juice to bet Avila here. I think that John's on something where, if you're going to bet Avila, probably go for that KO prop, because if she gets Stoliarenko in any trouble here, as tough as Stoliarenko is and as little quit as there is in that woman, I still think Avila, if she lands the right shot, she can finish her. She's just got to stay out of Stoliarenko's guard, because that's where the arm bars come from. If she fights this fight smart, she should finish it. She should win it pretty easily. If you're on the Avila side and you don't feel like you want to, take too much risk, maybe you just hedge just a tiny bit with that Stoliarenko by submission, because that's pretty much the only way that she wins this fight. I mean, you got to believe if it stays standing that, Avila is just going to pound on her. And, the way that Stoliarenko got held up against the cage by Kunitskaya for like 12 out of the 15 minutes of that fight, Avila is very strong. And, she could probably do that too. So I think that Avila will probably be able to stay comfortable in this fight. She can keep it standing. She should have a really easy time, but she's got to fight smart. And if she makes a dumb move, she could get snatched up here by Stoliarenko. So I'm not confident enough to bet it. But if I were to take a side here, I would go Avila by knockout, because I think that that's probably the most likely path. And at least you're getting some value there, instead of laying minus 350, minus 400 and just hoping that she wins. So yeah, I'd take Avila by knockout. But, maybe I would just take a little sprinkle on that. This is not a fight I'm terribly confident about either way.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to be biting on the chalk here on Julia Avila. I do think that she has some high upside, at least in terms of being a solid contender within this division once she starts to be a little bit more active, because that's kind of been her kryptonite, is pretty much activity. Like, we just don't see much of her. And then, unfortunately, she did have to drop down a couple rungs last time after taking an L to Sijara Eubanks as a pretty hefty favorite once again. But like John said, like Weezy said, I love the under in this spot, man. I love the plus money spot. When they were originally scheduled to fight back in March, I took a shot at that plus 150. I thought that was a good shot. And even this time, I got plus 133 this time, but I still like the plus money spot because I still think that both girls are capable of a finish. I love calling Stoliarenko the Lithuanian Ronda Rousey. Like, how can you not, with 8 armbar wins out of 9 wins total? You got to do it, right? I believe somebody else actually gave her that moniker, but I'm going to keep it alive for sure. But I do think that she's going to run into some trouble here with the black belt to Avila. I'll be surprised if we get a meme women's MMA armbar from guard type of thing. But even if it does, at least that would cash the under, as long as it happens within the first 12 and a half minutes of this fight. I do think Avila controls where this fight goes. Also, last thing I'll say actually about Stoliarenko, you guys were talking about the Kunitskaya fight. I found that to be one of the most, probably one of the most hilarious fights I've ever seen regarding, Yana Kunitskaya trying to implementing her dirty clinch game, dirty boxing in the clinch, and fucking Stoliarenko just trying to drop down and trying to get a pull guard, but Yana Kunitskaya is just holding her up with her double underhooks. I don't think I've ever seen that in a fight before, but Yana made it known what her game plan was. It was clinch fucking, not grapple fucking, clinch fucking. And then Stoliarenko, sometimes she did, a couple times she did actually get successful in terms of pulling guard, and she did, I believe, at one time have a very close submission, but Yana Kunitskaya stayed disciplined, stayed smart, and got out of those submissions, as I'm expecting with Julia Avila here as well. Regardless, I'm hoping it's an arm that gets snatched, a neck that gets snatched, a knockout that happens. Regardless, as long as that under 2.5 hits, I'll be happy here. But I think it's ultimately going to be Julia Avila who gets her hand raised via knockout. I love that knockout prop by John. but I'm just going to cover a little bit more ground and take that under 2.5. Jonah, take us home in terms of this matchup. How are you feeling here?
Yeah, I played the under as well. I got under 2.5
Attaboy.
plus 162, I want to say, earlier
Nice.
this week. I was gonna play the under in the first iteration of this fight. I think I had like a plus 188 at that point, and then obviously not as good a number this time around. But it's one of those things where I think you guys cover the matchup. I don't need to spend too much time on it. I just think Avila has this quality that we see in women's MMA normally at the lower divisions, but even at this weight class where I think she's just too physical for Stoliarenko. It's one of those things where something must have just happened in Bellator or PFL because everyone's watching.
No. Capoloza got a pretty good knockout over Mo DeReese, but I'm just looking at the standings right now because they still have that Brandon Sales. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who he's supposed to fight. Brandon Sales, Dennis Goldsov. Yeah. That match is still coming up. But yeah, continue. Sorry.
No, it's just funny. I saw everyone looking up. I was like, oh my God, did I miss something in PFL? But back to this matchup. I just think Avila is too physical for her. We saw against Mazzani, it was a KO. I know Avila doesn't have the crispest, the most crisp technique in the world, but she hits hard. She's super physical. And, she dropped Kanzad, who's a pretty decent kickboxer. Like Avila has the ability to hang in technical fights, but also if you get, a girl who's just way more physical than, stronger than, hits harder than, which is what I think we have this weekend. I really think she's just going to run Stoliarenko over early in this fight. The under gets, some of that insurance for the Stoliarenko submission. The fighter is not so great when the thing that we're praising is, she was able to pull guard once or twice in that fight against Kunitskaya. Like her win condition is very much limited, I think.
Yeah.
And I think Avila's honestly a better grappler than her, a better wrestler than her. So I think Avila gets it done. If I had to bet the money line, I'd honestly probably lay the chalk, but I think the under is just a better look because if Avila's going to look minus 300, minus 400, she's going to get her out of there early. So under 2.5 plus 162 for my second bet of the week.
I love it. I love me a violence bet, and I'm glad that pretty much everybody on the panel is on the same page here. All right, let's move on to the next fight. We got talk about violence. We were supposed to get violence in his last fight, Marcin Prachnio going up against Ike Villanueva. I think probably the most unpredictable outcome last time around with Prachnio winning by decision over Khalil Roundtree, I believe, back in January. Uncle Weezy, I'm sure your stats were not able to predict that one for us, but please do let us know how you feel like this matchup between Villanueva and Prachnio will go down tomorrow night.
I hope when this fight ends, it won't be like in the last time when I was standing in front of that TV holding that Roundtree ticket saying, what fucking happened here? What happened? I remember placing that bet and I was actually laughing out loud thinking, wow, Prachnio comes out against Alves, gets knocked out twice. And then he gets starched in the first round again against Ankalaev. And, and that shot that Ankalaev hit him with, it hit his arm. And then his own arm knocked him out. And then Rodriguez, gets him in the clinch and just schools him. And I'm thinking to myself, why did this guy even get a fourth fight? So it just seemed like such easy money. But, with Prachnio, I'm not even going to talk about the stats too much. Let's talk stylistic in this matchup because Prachnio is a karate guy. He's got 19 pro fights, 14 wins. I believe, let's see, we've got a 71% knockout rate and a 7% sub. So, he's had 11 wins by finish. This guy finishes fights. He's a striker first, and it's the same thing with Villanueva. But it's the clash of styles because Prachnio is a karate guy, so he's going to need distance. He's going to need space. And Villanueva just uses his hands. He's not really even a kickboxer as much as he is just a boxer. So if Ike wants to be successful in this fight, he's going to need to march Marcin down, not give him that room to get off that kick-heavy attack, to get off that point fighting style. And plus, I think Roundtree actually did win that fight against – it was a close fight. Prachnio didn't win that one running away. But I think that Ike can march him down. I think Ike can make this fight very uncomfortable for Marcin, and Ike is not going to stand in front of Marcin and Prachnio like Khalil Roundtree did. He's going to make this a very dirty fight. He's going to stay close. He's probably going to put his back up against the cage, and he's probably going to have success the same way Rodriguez did, getting in close, using those elbows and those fists in the clinch. That's how I see Ike winning this fight. I have a 1-unit bet on Villanueva here, And I also love the under in this fight. I love the under because, you know, Villanueva can get knocked out too. He has been knocked out a couple times, but the dude is tough as hell. You know, he's really only getting finished by heavyweights, juice heads, and getting stopped by cuts. Otherwise, you got to bury this guy to get him out of there. So I am going with Villanueva. I feel pretty damn comfortable about this. If you're betting Prachnio at minus 200, you got a fucking problem, in my opinion. In my opinion, I wouldn't bet this guy at minus 120, 130, you know, against anybody. So, yeah, I'm going with Villanueva here. It's one of the more confident picks I have on the card. I think he's going to march him down, make it ugly, and beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, the top two favorite moments for me and meme-wise in the UFC, easy number one, Betch Correia punching herself when she was fighting Marion Renault, and two, fucking Marcin Prachnio walking into the left hook of Sam Alvey over and over again until he eventually gets fucking knocked out. Probably my favorite, second favorite moment of UFC history, meme-wise. But yeah, I absolutely agree with Weezy here. He hit all the notes, man. He's very on the money here regarding Prachnio. The way he found success in the Khalil Roundtree fight was kicks, kick. And Khalil Roundtree was just too scared to close the distance because I think he fears for his own chin. I think that Khalil Roundtree does not fully trust his own chin, and he wasn't comfortable enough in terms of closing the distance. So he just let Prachnio light him up with kicks for the majority of the 15 minutes in their fight. There was that close encounter for Prachnio at the ending of that second round where he almost got finished, but outside of that, Khalil had almost no success in that fight at all. Here against Ike Villanueva, for some reason, he seems to be the butt of the joke in the MMA betting community, but you got to believe that he has a solid chance to go out there and beat a guy like Prachnio, whose chin I still heavily question. I just think that he has a very bad chin. I think he has terrible durability issues, and I think that a guy like Ike Villanueva, like Weezy said, a bruiser type of guy, a boxer who's not going to stand in front of Prachnio. He's going to move forward. He's not going to give him the space that he needs to get his kicks off, and he's going to stay in his face and probably knock him out. So yeah, I do like Villanueva here as well. And I got to say, he is probably the one underdog I feel like most confident about on this card, a straight underdog. My official dog of the night play that I actually put out was the under in the last fight that we just talked about, but my next spot would have been Ike Villanueva. I feel a little bit better about that under from the last fight, but Villanueva would be my next dog spot, as I feel like he can go out there and find that chin of Prachnio. So I don't need to spend too much time on it. I feel like Weezy pretty much hit all the points there. I got Villanueva by knockout, but even that the line on him straight, I think is good enough to even take a shot on him there. Jonah, are you going to give any validity to Prachnio here, or are you on the Villanueva island as well?
You know, I think there's some validity to the Ike takes in the sense that, like, Prachnio was knocked out, 3 times in a row, big underdog to Khalil Roundtree. I thought he won that fight, but it certainly wasn't a performance that made you think, oh, this guy is, deserves to be minus 200 in the UFC. That being said, Ike Villanueva in his last time out, which is his first and only UFC victory, he was pretty consistent in the striking with Vinicius Moreira for a round, which I just don't feel great about that. Prachnio, say what you want about the guy. He is a decent kickboxer. And with Ike Villanueva, I liked Weezy's breakdown on this fight, and he said he was looking more towards the stylistics. If you just look at the stats real quick for Ike Villanueva, he has about 15, 16 minutes of cage time in the UFC. That's basically one fight going the distance. He literally has not landed a leg kick, and he almost hasn't hit his opponent to the body. I mean, he's a very one-dimensional. He was undersized at heavyweight. He's probably at his correct weight class now at light heavyweight. It's just one of those things where, like, he's just very one-dimensional, and I think he's capable of winning the fight. Prachnio's defense, it's not only that he's chinny per se, and he got knocked out with his guard up. He walked into that Alves left hook however many times, as you talked about, Locke. Like, this guy is not defensively sound. I do think he's the better fighter in Prachnio. Would I lay minus 200? No. I do think he gets the victory. What I bet is I actually have another violence bet on this fight. I played does not go the distance at, I think, minus 156 in this spot. It just feels like a market overreaction the same way Prachnio being minus 200 is. I mean, Khalil Roundtree, that fight was massively favored to end inside the distance. He wins via decision, and like, it's not often that we have a fight where these two guys in their combined 7 UFC appearances have been finished 5 times. That's not 5 of 7 have ended inside the distance. That's they have lost via KO, 5 of the 7 times. So in order to get an under, you obviously need someone to get the finish and someone to get finished. I think both these guys are more than capable of getting finished, and I just need one of them to land a big shot. And I think they'll have 15 minutes primarily at striking distance to get it done. So I'm on the under in this spot with another violence bet.
that fight doesn't go to decision line looks mighty juicy to me, especially with you bringing it to my attention. I had no idea it was actually at minus 165. That is absolutely crazy. Good luck to you. And I might actually end up tailing you on that because I do like that spot as well.
It's moved a little bit. I see like minus 180 now. I got minus 156 earlier in the week. If you line shop, I think there's probably some minus 165, minus 170s out there still.
John, how are you feeling about this one? You on the Prachnio train, or are you liking Villanueva as well?
I'm actually going to go a little contrarian here. I like the goes the distance here. So it was still available at plus 200 on FanDuel. The goes the distance is plus 175, but the fight ends by points, which is the same bet as plus 200. So I like that because I do agree with Ike having the more knockout side. As Weezy mentioned, Villanueva is very tough. He actually fought, I think, at middleweight before in his career, and now he's kind of way inflated, so he could take punches really well. So if there's a finish in this fight, I do lean it towards being an Ike knockout. I just can't really see Prachnio landing a knockout here. One other big difference is the Prachnio from the regionals and in his Russian fights or Polish fights, and the guy after, I think, is much different. I mean, the guy came off the sauce, and I kind of liked his last fight, though. I mean, he was getting underrated, and he proved that he was actually a lot better fighter than a lot of us were giving us credit for. I mean, like Locke said, that was such an unpredictable outcome for him to get that decision win. So this fight, I think it is going to go the distance. I think Prachnio is going to have success with his kicks on the outside. Villanueva is going to be trying to land those hands. As you guys have said, he's a strict boxer. I do think as opposed to what Jonas said, I do think he kind of has an idea of how to hit the body. And I think that's probably going to be something he's going to attack in this fight. But I just see it being hard for him to close the distance when Prachnio is going to be spamming those kicks, those body kicks on his guard. And I kind of see this being a competitive decision. Villanueva is going to have success with his hands. Prachnio is going to have success with his kicks. I think it's going to be a competitive decision where either guy is going to win. And if it is a finish, as I mentioned, I think it is going to be Ike knockout. And money line side, I do agree that you can't be laying minus 170 or higher on Prachnio. So money line side, Villanueva is the side. I don't disagree with your guys' bets on him at all. And I wouldn't be mad at either guy winning here because I'm on the goes to distance. Just a half unit play on goes to distance plus 200.
Plus 845, according to 5Dimes, was the line on Prachnio to win by decision in his last fight. So shout out to anybody that was sharp enough to actually bet that.
Nobody bet that. No one. No.
They're liars. They're absolute liars if they've said so. I agree with you, my man. All right, let's move on to the fifth fight of the night that we got. We got short notice Jeremiah Wells.
Jonah had something he want to say.
Sorry, go ahead, Jonah.
One thing real quick. I think the number that Martian got right there on the goes to decision at plus 200, that's pretty solid. I think we should just remind people and just remind ourselves as bettors, we're betting numbers and not necessarily fighters or specific props. And so if I'm betting doesn't go to decision minus 156, and that market now on FanDuel has moved to minus 230, I actually think there's, I wouldn't say value. I wouldn't bet it if I hadn't bet officially, if I hadn't bet the minus 156 to not go the distance, I wouldn't be interested in betting 200, and I probably won't arbitrage out. I could lock in at 15% ROI right now. That's just not really my style when I'm already on a good bet. But I think it's interesting. If you're looking at those numbers that Martian has, I don't think that, goes the distance plus 200 is a bad bet, despite the fact that I'm literally on the opposite side and only one can win. So I just think that's an important thing for all of us to remember as we're betting fights.
Absolutely. Betting the number rather than the outcome is definitely the way to be a successful capper for sure. And that's something that a lot of people definitely overlook in this game. All right, let's move on to the next fight. Like I said, Jeremiah Wells, short notice, CFFC champ coming in, taking on Alves. As I said earlier in the podcast, I was actually pretty heavy on Ramazan Ameev before he had to pull out. I believe he had visa issues, which kept him out of this fight. Now Alves takes on newcomer Jeremiah Wells. In terms of odds, we got minus 230-ish on Alves, plus 200-ish on Mr. Jeremiah Wells. Tough fight for me to break down here. I'm still trying to get a full grasp on Jeremiah Wells in this spot. Alves, he is a guy that I did fade last time around against Munir Lizez. Fully learned my lesson in that fight in terms of just, you can't just take a guy off of one, very good fight like he had against Abdul Razak Al Hassan and think he's going to be able to translate that into his next fight. But Alves definitely showed us his experience and his durability definitely will come through when he needs it most. Here against Jeremiah Wells, though, he seems like he should be able to cruise. Seems like a spot where he'll be able to either land takedowns, have success with his striking. I feel like he might be the bigger or the heavier puncher, at least a more technical puncher too. Whereas Jeremiah Wells, it seems like he has his success in short little bursts. Every now and then he'll have that little burst of like a blitz attack moving forward, throwing big bombs. If it lands, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. Two of his losses, both of them coming via decision. He only has, I believe, 2 or 3 fights where he's won via decision as well. So it seems more often than not, he does focus on trying to find that big shot to put his opponents out. Alves, seems to have some cardio issues at times too. So that's a little bit of a concern, especially when you're looking at possibly dropping minus 230 on chalk here. I don't think that this is one of those spots where people should be going, running to the betting window and parlaying Alves in the spot. This could be like a shocker. Like we had it a couple weeks ago as well, where, some people, credit to them, even myself, I picked Kamala Kirk to beat Makwan Amerikani coming in on short notice. And this could be another spot where we could get an upset, but I just don't see where Jeremiah Wells truly runs off the table. Like unless he lands a knockout blow of some sort, then yeah, sure, he probably gets the win here. But I think that Alves will be able to take whatever Wells is throwing at him. Not to mention the level of competition is just a dramatic step up for Jeremiah Wells compared to what he was fighting on the CFFC scene. So I do like Alves here. I'm still trying to figure out the method in which he wins. More often than not, he does like to get the finish. Even the line, the inside the distance line is currently sitting around minus 160. So minus 165 for the under 2.5, which leads us to believe that this fight will probably be a violence spot. But I just feel like Alves will just do what he needs to do to win this fight. And last thing I'll actually say about it, if you guys are a prize picks person, they actually have Alves takedowns at 1. I definitely am taking the over there, as I do think that he should be able to land at least 1 takedown here against Jeremiah Wells to kind of nullify the big power that's going to be coming back his way from the Jeremiah Wells side of things. But I'm going to take Alves. All week I've kind of been saying by decision, but I've been flip-flopping in my head whether he's going to get the knockout, submission, or decision. I'll stick with my guns at decision, but it's not my most confident spot on the card either. So I'm going to go Alves by decision in this spot. Jonah, I'll shift it on over to you. How are you feeling about this fight?
Yeah, with Jeremiah Wells, I love that you brought up the Kamwela Kirk victory a few weeks ago, because I feel like it's hard for me to, wager on these guys who are coming in on short notice during the COVID era, who with Wells, he's coming off a 2-year layoff. Like we haven't seen this 2 years. He's 34 years old. He's not some, massive prospect at this point. And for every Kamwela Kirk, for every, Terrence McKinney, there's a bunch of guys who have come in and gotten their ass kicked and not been heard from since, and I feel like that's just kind of a false narrative that's been portrayed by these like short notice guys who are coming in, getting the victory on short notice. I feel like, some of the times they do, but it's not really a trend that I think has much semblance behind it. So for me, like, I think Alves is the better fighter. He clearly has flaws in terms of the cardio you mentioned before. But if we look at this guy's entire career, like he's lost 3 times in the last 5 years to Kamaru Usman, James Krause, and Randy Brown. Like that's a pretty decent resume when you're fighting a 34-year-old on a week's notice. So am I laying the chalk with Alves at minus 230? Probably not, but I'm also not rushing to bet a guy in a really tough circumstance here. Weezy said earlier in the show he likes to throw the narratives out, and I do too. I think narratives are completely overplayed in MMA, but this isn't even a narrative thing. It's just like put yourself in this guy's shoes. This has nothing to do with betting 25K on yourself. This is a guy who has not fought in 2 years and is now fighting a high-level UFC fighter on a week's notice. I just think that's a really tough spot to go into. So a pass for me on the current line. I think Alves gets it done this weekend.
I love it. John, how are you feeling about this matchup?
So Wells is a Philly guy. I've known about him for a little bit. I've actually seen him fight live once, and he does train at the best MMA gym in Philadelphia, the same gym Sean Brady trains at, EEFC, and they are a good gym. So I'm sure he's going to improve. He hasn't fought in a year and a half. That's a concern. But I think the guy's been signed to the UFC for about a year now. I could be wrong. I think he was supposed to fight Miguel Baeza.
Correct.
Yeah, so I think he's kind of been preparing for this. I'm sure his training has upped in intensity as he's preparing for this UFC debut. So I think we will see some improvements, but going back to his past few fights, man, I'm not impressed. I think that he does have some power in his hands. Obviously, he got that nice knockout, but he doesn't have the highest striking output. He can hit takedowns and stay in top position, but I don't think he's the greatest top position grappler. So the guy is well-rounded everywhere, but just doesn't excel in any one particular area. And on the other side, Alves, this guy's really hot and cold. I mean, you look at his past 4 fights, he's, looked bad in 2 of them, looked great in 2 of them. And I think that he will come out and win round 1 here. And if you like Jeremiah Wells, just wait to live bet him, honestly, because see how he does after 3-5 minutes. See if Alves is slowing down, blowing his whole gas tank. And Alves did look great against Laziz there, or Mornier Laziz. But he also came out extremely hard in round 1 there. And if Laziz survives that body kick, that onslaught there, who knows what that fight looks like in rounds 2 and 3. So I do favor Alves in round 1. I'm going to be picking him straight out, but look to live bet Jeremiah Wells after the first round here. And it would be cool to see the Philly guy pull off the upset victory.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with John in terms of the heat that Warlley Alves came out with in that Laziz fight. It almost felt like he felt the disrespect that everybody was throwing into that fight. Obviously, the betting line was heavily skewed in the Laziz side, and even the UFC marketing machine. It seemed like they're really getting behind Mounir Laziz, especially over there on Fight Island, closer to where he's actually from. Weezy, how do you see this one playing out? And do you actually think the short notice Jeremiah Wells has the chops to pull off the upset here?
Yeah, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for Mr. Wells here, man, because, I'm looking at the strength of schedule metrics that I keep on my stats. And Warlley Alves overall in his UFC competition, he's fighting guys that have a 2.26 win-to-loss ratio outside of their fights with Alves. So they have an average record of 5.83 and 2.58. So whenever you see a ratio over 2, it means that they're fighting some really good competition. And then you got Wells, like John had just mentioned. This guy's coming in, I think, 1 year and 9 months. It might even be a 2-year layoff. He hasn't fought since 2019. There's a huge discrepancy in the level of competition that these guys have fought. And, they're both finishers, but Wells has never been finished. If we look at the pro experience, Alves way more experience in addition to having fought the tougher competition. Then you pile on that Wells is 4 years older. He's 34 and Warlley Alves is still 30. So, I see Alves actually having the power advantage here, even though that knockout that Wells knocked out that Ali dude, that was scary. That dude slept. I mean, that was so, obviously this guy Wells, he does have some power in his hands, but so does Alves. If Alves lands any of those body kicks like he did against Laziz, man, it's going to be over for Wells. There's just too many things against Wells right now. The huge layoff, the huge level of competition step up that he's making here. And then you got the nerves of a UFC debut that you got to deal with. And you're doing it on short notice. It's hard to see Wells winning this fight. I got a bet on the under in this one. I think I got -140. The fight doesn't go to decision on FanDuel a couple days ago before the line really moved. I see somebody getting finished here, most likely Wells.
Yeah, not to mention all the things that you just laid out that Wells has to deal with going into this fight. Then you got Warlley Alves staring across the cage from you. Like it's not a good look for Wells to be coming into the UFC with the stiff test like Warlley Alves across from him. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got Michel Prazeres himself coming off a pretty lengthy layoff as well, going up against Shavkat Rakhmonov, who seems to be the talk of the town this week. Jonah, I'm actually going to let you kick this one off. You think Shavkat is all that the Twitter timeline makes him out to be, or do you think that Prazeres pulls off the upset here?
Can I say neither? I don't know if I think Shavkat is. I don't know if I think Shavkat's just like bona fide for sure top 15 guy or top 10 guy. I know some people think he's a title contender. I think based on what we've seen, that's a little aggressive, I would say. But look, he's 13-0. Had a decent win in his debut against Alex Oliveira. I mean, it wasn't a spot where he was really tested in the facets of the game that I have some doubts about, regarding cardio, being his back, that sort of thing. But look, he's 26 years old. He's a good athlete. He clearly has talent. I mean, undefeated guy. Sometimes, the UFC puts some hype trains behind guys that I think don't necessarily deserve it. And I'm not saying whether or not this guy deserves it. He's fighting as a Kazakhstan. Like, they clearly want to promote him. I think he's decent. I think he's good. I think he has a high ceiling in the long term. In terms of this fight, Prazeres, I don't ever like to put too much stock into one performance. In other sports, when you're betting, you look at a massive sample size. Baseball is 162 games. Basketball is 82. MMA, we don't have that many fights, let alone like minutes of performances from one guy. So I don't like to ever put too much stock into one performance. But I got to say, like, Prazeres' last time out was 2 years ago. It was prior to a USADA suspension that he's now coming off of. And against Ismail Nardiev, it was competitive in the grappling realm. And that has kind of been the tool that Prazeres has always used. It's the same overhand into a takedown. He's used it forever. And now the guy, he's 39, aging Brazilian. We know that, historically those type of fighters do not have great cardio in the tank. And it's just hard for me to back a guy. Like if he's competitive in the grappling with Ismail Nardiev, who has since been cut from the UFC, mostly due to the fact that he can't really grapple, and then was finished on the regional scene after that. I'm not trying to say anything bad about the Austrian Wonder Boy. Like he's 24 years old. He has some upside long-term potentially as well. It's hard for me to back Prazeres, even at this big plus number, coming off the layoff, coming off of how he looked his last time out. So I'm not laying minus 300 with Shavkat. I don't think he's necessarily the next big thing, but hopefully, I hope he gets an early first round finish. I could fade him his next time out against a more formidable opponent. Prime Prazeres, I think, gives him a pretty good shot here. I think it's a close competitive fight, but it's just hard to trust a 39-year-old coming off of a USADA suspension. So I think Shavkat gets it done, probably inside the distance, makes for a strong play on DraftKings, all that sort of stuff, but it's not a spot where I'm laying minus 300 for sure.
Not just 39 years old, 1 month shy of actually turning 40 years old in July as well. John, I was actually very intrigued, and I thought I did circle Michel Prazeres' name in terms of guys that I was really looking forward to seeing on the scales this morning, especially considering the USADA violation, close to 40 years old. Let's see what the fire hydrant looks like on the scales this morning. And to be honest, it looked like normal Michel Prazeres. How do you think he fares in this matchup against this hot prospect, Shavkat Rakhmonov?
Yeah, so it does seem like bettors are loving Shavkat this week, and I think people are jumping the gun a little bit too early. And I understand all the concerns, the red flags about Prazeres, the long layoff, the USADA, the loss. But before that, the guy was on a very hefty win streak. 4 years, 8 fights or something like that. He is a career lightweight, so he is kind of outmatched in size, and that was evident by the weigh-ins here. But doing tape on Shavkat before the Oliveira fight, I had a lot of questions. I believe he was dropped on the regionals. He was taken down. He was stuck on bottom. And I just had some questions. I actually bet Oliveira there, and I don't think a lot of those questions were answered. That was kind of a quick finish, but Oliveira has been looking worse and worse, and it's possible that Oliveira is more shot than Michel Prazeres is. So I'm not quite ready to write Michel Prazeres off. I think if he's got anything left in the tank and he doesn't get knocked out in the first few minutes of this fight, I think he's going to make the fight competitive. I think his offensive grappling could get takedowns here. Shavkat doesn't look good off of his back, so I think the value is on Prazeres at this point. And I understand the early bettors coming in on Shavkat, the young athletic guy with all the size advantages here, but skill wise, I just don't think he's proven enough to be minus 300 over Prazeres here. So I'm cheering for the old good dog Prazeres here. I like guys like him. I like Trinaldo, these old Brazilian guys. So I'm hoping he can put on a veteran performance, and I'm not quite believing the Shavkat hype yet, but I still got to pick Shavkat. I think I see him knocking him out, sadly. I think in the first round, he's just going to come out of aggressive. That big knee that he landed on Oliveira, some big athletic strike is going to probably put away Prazeres, sadly. But I'm really hoping that he survives that and makes it interesting in the later rounds.
I definitely side with John's affinity for 40-year-old Brazilians, but it's definitely been messing me up the last couple of months with Jacare Souza and obviously most recently Francisco Trinaldo. Hopefully Prazeres can actually pull through.
Hey, Anderson Silva, we got momentum with Anderson Silva.
Yeah, there we go.
46, and he's still looking sharp.
I love it. Weezy, what's your take on this matchup? I know there's not a lot of data, obviously, on Shavkat, considering that he's only had one UFC fight. But how do you fare? How do you think that he'll fare here against 40-year-old Mr. Michel Prazeres?
Yeah, we briefly touched on all the red flags here. Prazeres 39, Rakhmonov 26, so 13 years younger. Prazeres 5'6", Rakhmonov 6'1". It looked more like 5'2" against 6'5". Did you see that face-off today? They looked like they were 2 or 3 weight classes different. And I know Prazeres is built like a fire hydrant, and if that guy gets on top of you, you're not getting him off of you. He's like a brick. But so we don't have much data on Rakhmonov. But here's a couple of little cheeky little things I found in the data that. All right, so we've already know all the reasons why people love Rakhmonov. He's minus 300. All the money's coming in on him. Let's go the other way and start to look at the other side of the fight here. Shavkat, in his only fight in the UFC, had 15% control time, but he gave up 45%. Oliveira stuck him against the cage and held him there. This was a 4.67-minute fight, so we're about 2.2 minutes of that fight. Rakhmonov had his back pressed up against the cage by a skinny Oliveira and was held there and didn't get off the cage until he jumped for that guillotine, which finished the fight, right? So what I'm seeing is if there's any chance in hell that Prazeres comes out of this fight with a win, he's going to have to try to out-grapple Rakhmonov. And here's the numbers that I have for Prazeres. 13 fights, 164 minutes of cage time, and this guy has attempted 122 takedowns.
Damn.
Now just think about that for a minute. This guy, he doesn't care about his striking. He lands 2.44 significant strikes per minute, and he absorbs 2.49. This guy's not trying to outbox you. He really isn't trying to knock you out on the feet. He goes for about almost one takedown per minute. and think about that. This is a guy who's amassed 33% control time in the UFC. So you can't get a takedown when you're on top of somebody. So you look at the 164 minutes that this guy's spent in the cage, and you take out the 55 or so minutes that he's been on top, and it's 110 minutes and 122 takedown attempts. So this is very clear. The data tells you if Prazeres has a chance in hell of winning this fight, he's going to have to try to take down Rakhmonov early and often, maybe put his back up against the cage like Oliveira had some success doing. If he does try to take Rakhmonov down, he's going to have to watch out for that guillotine. That's going to be a big problem because Rakhmonov's guillotine is legit, and we already saw it once against the UFC veteran. So, yeah, a lot of red flags here on Prazeres, a lot of reasons not to like him. But when you're looking at a minus 300 line, you want to be real honest about any possible chance that the opposition has to fuck you out of your money. And Prazeres does actually have a path. I'm on Rakhmonov. I bet him way earlier in the week, so I got him at decent odds, but I really didn't bet a lot on him. I think the line's a little wide. I think there are paths to victory here for Prazeres, but I'm still picking Rakhmonov. 100% finish rate. I think Prazeres will gas if he doesn't have success with the takedowns early. Rakhmonov should finish him, but I'm not betting him at this line.
Yeah, all week week in and week out, this normally happens to me where I have people just flooding my DMs and just hitting me up on Twitter or Instagram, whatever it is, saying this guy should be your lock of the night play. And for this week, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov. People are like, Shavkat Rakhmonov should be your lock of the night play. And I'm like, hold your horses, right? There's a couple of times over the past couple of weeks where I'm just like, I don't agree. You know, Ludovic Klein against Mike Trezano. Everybody's like, pick Ludovic Klein. Claudio Puelles against fucking Jordan Levitt. Pick Jordan Levitt. You know what I mean? Like, there's certain spots where you just got to step back a little bit and look at it as a whole. And Prazeres, like John was saying, probably the sneakiest 8-fight winning streak inside the UFC before getting it snapped by Ismail Nardiev back in 2019. And obviously, yeah, the narratives of the 39-year-old, 40-year-old, just pop for USADA, all of that doesn't really help the case for Prazeres. But the guy is still a tough out. Never been finished in 3 of his losses. Still can come forward. What neck is fucking Rakhmonov going to latch onto? There is no neck. You know what I mean? So I think Rakhmonov is going to have to go out there and find a limb of some sort. And even that, I think freaking Prazeres might even be able to curl him while he's getting armbarred, because I think the guy's just so jacked and so strong. The issue I have here in terms of Prazeres is his gas tank, though. Like, he does seem to really fall off later in fights. It seems like Rakhmonov has that propensity to find the finish, given all 13 of his wins coming via finish. But what does his cardio look like when he gets pushed up against the cage for 12 minutes or for 10 minutes or whatever it may be, right? So there's so many question marks as to why I would not be taking the minus 300 on Rakhmonov here. I think he wins, don't get me wrong, but I actually think he wins by decision here. I think that Prazeres is very tough to put away. We see it time and time again when guys come into the UFC and they have, finishes galore on their record, but they're fighting regional bums, and then they come to the UFC and then their finishes don't happen anymore. And I think it's just a matter of time until Shavkat finds that guy that's tough to put away, like Prazeres, and he's just going to have to try to win this fight either by pointing him from the outside or, maybe landing a takedown or 2 of his own and just controlling this fight from on top. Because I do think Prazeres definitely has some concerning gas tank issues that Shavkat can take advantage of, but I need to see Shavkat push in his own right and still come back from adversity and pull the victory off. So it's a no bet for me in the minus 300 range. I think he wins, but I think the way that I'm going to be attacking this, even just as a DGen sprinkle here, is going to be Shavkat to win by decision which is currently sitting at plus 255. I don't mind that spot there. I'll take a little bit of a sprinkle there because I think that's his best way to win this fight. Even on the flip side here, though, if you have any hope for Prazeres by decision at plus 440 is not too bad either, because I do think he has a shot to actually pull it off himself. And last thing I'll say about this matchup, even the fight to go to decision, right? Plus 125. I think that's a pretty solid line considering the way that Prazeres lulls his opponents into these types of fights. And given that Shavkat hasn't really fought somebody to this level, I forgot who it was. It was Jonah or John that said that they actually believe that Cowboy is a little bit more shot than Prazeres at this point in time. And I might actually have to agree with that, but we'll see what Prazeres actually looks like tomorrow afternoon before we ride on home about it. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got, sorry, Jonah, I got you, right? You already had your, you started this one off. Yeah.
Yes,
all right.
sir.
Next up, we got the prelim headliner. We got Danilo Marques, my arch nemesis inside the UFC for some reason, going up against Kennedy and Nzechukwu. In terms of odds, we got minus 135 on Nzechukwu and plus 115 on Danilo Marques. John, I'm actually going to let you kick this one off. How are you feeling about this matchup?
Marques is honestly the only underdog I'm really liking this week with actual confidence, because I think he should be the slight favorite here. I just think his grappling path is a lot more consistent than Nzechukwu going to be outstriking him, because Marques on the feet isn't a great striker, but he's not bad. I don't think he's going to be like at risk to get knocked out at any time. It's not like Kennedy's a huge hitter, but Marques, if he can get the fight to the floor, I mean, he does that pretty consistently. He shot a takedown about like 10 seconds into the Mike Rodriguez fight. He shot multiple takedowns. Rodriguez kept getting back up, and he kept dragging him back down. So I think his grappling cardio is good, and I think he's going to shoot consistent takedowns on Nzechukwu, and I don't think Kennedy quite has the takedown defense to stop them. And I got to give Kennedy some credit for his last fight against Oldberg. I mean, the guy kind of had a bad reputation going into that fight, and had a tough fight, looked pretty durable, honestly, and just kept coming forward and throwing punches and finally got that comeback victory. But it just doesn't really apply that much to this matchup. You really got to look at the Darko Stosic fight, the Paul Craig fight, and I think he struggled enough with the takedowns there and the grappling there to make Marques the side here. So I'm probably going to be locking in some action in the next 12 hours. I'm looking to do like 1.5, maybe even 2 units on Marques at plus money. So I like him a lot here.
I like it. That's definitely one of the contrarian takes I've been seeing all week, but you have some weight to it. I can't disagree with that. Weezy, how are you seeing this matchup play between these light heavyweights?
I'm on Kennedy here, but everything that John just said is actually very on point. He's right about Marques. What I like about Marques is that the guy's a grappler, right? And he doesn't fuck around like he's a striker. There's nothing that pisses me off more. Like, we're going to talk about Ovin St. Preux shortly. When St. Preux was fighting Jamal Hill, you'd think if the guy had a fucking brain cell in his head, he'd try to take this guy down. But no, not one takedown attempt in that entire fight. And then what happens? He gets starched, wakes up looking at the lights, wondering what happened. And Marques is not that kind of guy. Marques is a guy who shoots takedowns in the first 30 seconds of all of his fights against strikers. He doesn't pretend that he's a striker. He's a grappler first, and he acts like it. And then I got the numbers to prove it here. 2 fights, he's got 36.8% control time, and he's yielded 30% control time. That means over 2/3 of Marquez's fights are taking place either on the cage or with somebody's back against the canvas. That's where Marques is going to be at his best in this fight. But when we look at Kennedy, I see a lot of the things in Kennedy's numbers that you want to see when they're going to be fighting against a grappler like Marques. So Kennedy, now, while Marques has attempted 23 takedown attempts in 2 fights, exactly what you want to see out of any grappler where their path to victory is grappling. Kennedy and Nzechukwu has faced 33 takedown attempts in 5 fights, and only 7 of them have been completed, which means he's successfully defended 26 out of 33 takedowns for a 78.79% takedown defense. And not only that, he's been taken down 7 times in the UFC, but he's only been controlled 3.15% of his UFC career. That means that he's being controlled when he is taken down less than 30 seconds per takedown. So even when he does get taken down, he gets right back up. Another thing that I like about Kennedy is that ridiculous conditioning that he has. It's flat out off the charts for a 205er for a guy of his size. This guy's gas tank is never ending. He can continue to put a pace on you. And what I'm worried about here from Marques is he's going to have to pressure, and he's going to have to constantly spam takedowns in order to be comfortable in this fight. But that's exhausting, and he's going to get tired before Nzechukwu does. So I see Nzechukwu weathering the storm for the first couple of rounds here, getting a late finish by knockout. I am going to bet the third round Kennedy prop. I also have Kennedy at minus 104, I believe, just one unit. I'm not going all in on it. But, I think this is an extremely interesting stylistic matchup. It's your classic striker versus grappler. The last thing I want to say about Kennedy, 83-inch reach, and he's a southpaw. So whenever this fight is standing, I think Marques is just going to have all kinds of problems. If Kennedy's conditioning holds up, if his takedown defense holds up, and when he does get taken down, if he gets up quickly, I think he's going to have an easy win here. But Marques isn't going to make it easy for him because Marques knows who he is. His coach is Damian Maia. No better grappling coach to have in the world. So this is a classic stylistic matchup. It just depends on how you think Kennedy's going to deal with the takedown attempts. I think he'll come out the other side winning this fight, but it's going to be a great one. It's actually the one I'm looking forward to second most on the card.
Interesting. I do, for some reason, just have this hatred for Marques. I don't think that he's much of a UFC level fighter. You know what I mean? I think he's lucky in the fact that he's at the light heavyweight division, which is kind of shallow at this point in time. But he is getting wins. He's pulling off a big win in his last fight against Mike Rodriguez, who just did not have the willingness to go out there and throw any punches. It just seemed like he was too scared about the takedowns that were going to be coming back his way. And just off of Marques, shooting takedowns nice and early like he did in that fight, it just instilled that fear in Mike Rodriguez, and he was just too gun shy and just couldn't get anything off. Whereas Nzechukwu here, I think he's going to actually let it go a little bit more. He might get taken down, like Weezy was saying, but he does do a really good job in terms of getting back to his feet. I think that Nzechukwu will continue to win fights just based off of his power, athleticism, and his durability until he starts fighting guys that are technically much, much better than him. Great showing in his Carlos Alberg fight. Obviously took a shit kicking first and then eventually came back and won it. I think somebody even in the comment section was talking about the Homer Simpson style. That's exactly what he pretty much did in that fight. But now here against Marques, I think that Marques is not going to be able to handle the striking of Kennedy now, albeit he's not the most technical striker, don't get me wrong, but I think he has decent enough power to at least make Danilo Marques fold in this situation. You guys, if you guys have been watching the show for a while, you guys know I have a little bit of a hard on for Fortis MMA guys because I truly do like Saif Sayuda. I think he's a very good coach and he knows how to instill, the motivation into his fighters to actually get the wins here. And I think that this is a great spot for him to go out there and beat a one-dimensional guy like Danilo Marques, who is known primarily as Shogun, who was jiu-jitsu coach. So let's just leave that as what it is because we know what Shogun's been doing in the jiu-jitsu realm since he's taken that steed. But I will go with Kennedy here. I think he actually gets it done early. I think he puts the pain on him nice and early here. I think he gets it done in round one, but he does definitely have the cardio advantage to lean on here. And I think that Marques, although a black belt, I don't think he'll find a submission in this spot as he won't be able to really settle on top of Kennedy, who's going to continuously be moving, bucking his hips, trying to get back to his feet. And then once he gets back to his feet, that gas tank of Marques is going to start to deplete, and that striking is going to look a lot more lopsided as Kennedy and Nzechukwu continues to build confidence. Again, I wish there wasn't as much rawness and greenness in Kennedy's game still. Otherwise, I'd probably be going pretty heavy on him in the spot, but I'm just passing it all in all. I still do expect him to win this fight and win it pretty early here in round one. Jonah, how are you feeling about Marques and Kennedy? And do you think that Marques can go 3-0 in the UFC?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to play mediator here a little bit. John and Weezy obviously are on opposite sides here. Locke, I know you said you're passing it. This is a pass for me at the current moment. I honestly do think there may be some value in Marques as an underdog, but I'm kind of having trouble letting go of my priors, meaning like prior to him getting in the UFC. I thought Danilo Marques was very bad, and I'm not ready to take – I am not ready to take the L on him quite yet. I'm not going to admit I was wrong. I'm too stubborn to do that at this point. But I mean, the guy clearly has a game plan and has been able to execute it twice. He will go for that single leg. If he doesn't get it, cage push, will go to a clinch, body lock position, tries to get a trip. He knows what he's good at. He doesn't fuck around. He goes to the grappling, and I respect that. I am all for guys, optimizing their path to victory. That is what a good, smart fighter does. A fighter like Marques, who may not be super physically talented, but he's made it work, right? He's 2-0 inside the UFC. I didn't ever think I would be saying that. He's fought Khadis Ibragimov, Mike Rodriguez. Is the strength of schedule great? Absolutely not. But I didn't think he was going to go 2-0 there, and he did. So I'll give props to him in that regard. The one thing I'll say about Kennedy is he has struggled a little bit in the grappling, but I think if you honestly look closely at the two situations where he was really pushed hard in the grappling realm, first of all, against Paul Craig went 1 of 17 on takedowns in that fight, and Kennedy actually had 4 minutes of control time. Now, you have to remember that the way control time works in terms of how the UFC measures it now, which actually drives me insane, this is a rant for another day, is if someone is like pulling guard, or if you're in a position where anytime you're on bottom, it counts as someone else controlling you. And that might make sense for Paul Craig, but there are also times like if you have a triangle from bottom and you are controlling your opponent, I think, who was it a few weeks ago? Maybe like Andrea Lee was controlling Shevchenko in that triangle off her back. That counted as control time for Shevchenko, which just drives me nuts.
So weird.
That's a non sequitur, but it just kind of goes to show, like, I don't think Kennedy really out grappled Craig. I mean, obviously he got tapped out. He lost the fight via submission. I just think that's a little misleading. What I think is more encouraging for Kennedy is the Stosic fight, where he got taken down 4 times. Now, we know Darko is just kind of spams takedowns in volume, has never had great top control, but it's encouraging that Kennedy was only on his back for 2 minutes of that fight. So I think that it's not like he's a complete black hole in the grappling realm. That being said, I don't think he's a great striker either. We've mentioned on this show a few times, like, the Ulberg performance was impressive, the come from behind victory. I mean, the guy ate 80 significant strikes in the first round. Like, I don't think he's all that as a striker. So it's hard for me to lay chalk on Kennedy, where despite the fact that I don't think he's a black hole on the ground, I think he's at a grappling disadvantage, I would say, against the guy who's going to pursue that route. And in the striking realm, I don't think it's a blowout either. That being said, I'm just too stubborn to take the value, or what I perceive as value here, on Marques. Plus 130, plus 140, maybe I'd be interested. But I don't think it's going to get there. So I'm just happy to pass here. Neither of these guys I'm looking to back them in the future, I don't think. But we'll see. I'm kind of interested to see how it goes down, because I do think that there's kind of that striker versus grappler dynamic, but I also think that it's not as big a discrepancy in either realm as most people think going into the fight. So it's an interesting matchup. I'm looking forward to it, but ultimately a pass.
Sorry, did you actually give a prediction though?
If you're going to make me,
you got it. That's what the people are here for, brother.
All right, I'll go with Danilo, but I'll say like 51%, 52%, just as the cop out right there. But yeah, I do think that Danilo he's more reliable to go to the things that will win him the fight. So that's my pick. Not something I feel super confident in.
All right, let's move on to the main card here. And right before I do, I always want to remind you guys, hit that like, hit that subscribe if you guys haven't already. And also, I have the Twitter links of all 3 of these guys in the description below. So you guys don't even have to go to Twitter and search their names. Just go to the description below, click the link, and hit that follow, because trust me, they deserve it. They are sharp dudes, as they've already showcased for you halfway through the card here. All right, let's get to the main card now. Curtain jerker, we got Renato Moicano going up against Jay Herbert right after Dennis Goldsov just pulls off a victory over Mr. Brandon Sales. A good win for him there. But getting back to the card here, like I said, Renato Moicano, Jay Herbert. And I believe we're going to be kicking things off here with my guy, Uncle Wheezy. Wheezy, how are you feeling about these lightweights now, actually? And how do you see this one going down?
Moicano, former featherweight. This will be his 3rd fight at lightweight. He was evidently killing himself to make featherweight. And then we got Herbert coming in with his 2nd fight in the UFC. His first one, he got knocked out by Francisco Trinaldo, but also put Trinaldo on his ass with a great straight right at the beginning of the 2nd round there.
Yeah.
So, when I analyze this fight on my channel, what I'm thinking of this, even though Moicano loves to show his striking, I'm looking at this as a striker versus grappler matchup. Moicano is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and I think he'll be most comfortable on the ground here. He's like a world champion too, so the guy's not just, didn't get a black belt at a McDojo. This guy finishes fights via submission quite often. One of the things that I've seen out of Herbert that I don't like at all is piss poor takedown defense. Pre-UFC and in the UFC, he yielded 2 out of 3 takedown attempts to Francisco Trinaldo. So that's given him a 33% takedown defense in the UFC. I think if Moicano gets him down once, he's gonna wrap up that neck and it's gonna be over with. Herbert's got great power, great boxing. I love how straight his right comes down the pipe. There's no wasted action there. He throws with a ton of power. But, the thing is, I don't think Moicano is going to stand on the feet with this guy. one of the things that I broke down with the Moicano situation was Moicano's at 10 fights in the UFC, but he's only had 13 takedown attempts, right? So you'd like to see, if you're going to be betting on Moicano and thinking this guy needs a takedown and he needs a submission to comfortably win this fight so that Herbert isn't on the feet too long where he can actually test Moicano's chin, which has been tested a lot and it hasn't held up well. The thing I'm seeing here, though, is even though he only attempted 13 takedowns, he got 7 of them. So when he goes for them, he does get them. Also, if you look at Moicano's experience in the UFC, you will see guys that have some of the best takedown defense at 145 and 155 that he was going against. And I'll go through it real quick for you guys here because I think it's real important. Rafael Fisayev has 100% takedown defense. We've got Chan Sung Jung, 78% takedown defense. Jose Aldo, 91% takedown defense. Calvin Kattar, above 70% takedown defense. Jeremy Stevens, 66. Zubaira Tukhugov, 100% takedown defense. So he's fought a lot of guys where he hasn't been able to use his wrestling game because they have excellent takedown defense. He's not going to have that problem with Herbert. And frankly, I think he knows he's lost 3 out of his 4 losses in the UFC have come by knockout. So he's painfully aware that if he stays standing, that he could get chin checked again and lose. However, if he just tries to take down this guy, he's going to get it probably the first time, and he'll probably wrap up that neck. I'm calling Moicano by first-round submission, rear naked choke. I even bet first-round submission at plus 500 for Moicano on FanDuel. I think we're going to see black belt jiu-jitsu Renato Moicano. And I think this fight's going to look an awful lot like the fight against Hadzovic, another guy with piss-poor takedown defense. And what happened in that fight? Moicano shot a takedown in the first 10 seconds, and he finished it in 44. I see this fight taking place exactly the same way. Moicano's probably my safest pick of the night. I'm all over him here.
Can I lay it out any better than my guy Uncle Weezy just did? Because I pretty much am on the same side here. But the one caveat I will say though, I have a slight concern regarding the durability of Moicano. So I'd much rather take that under 2.5, which I still see dangling around minus 170-ish on most spots. Go ahead, Weezy.
By the way, I neglected to mention, I think this fight is definitely going to end under 2.5 rounds because if Herbert touches that chin, I think Moicano's going down.
Yeah, exactly. That's my main question mark here about Moicano. I think either way, whoever wins here, it's going to be under 2.5 rounds. And I'll say this was my second in the running for possible lock of the night plays for me, as I do believe that both guys have durability issues. And also, like Uncle Weezy laid out, the takedown defense on Jay Herbert is just so bad that I think that Moicano will be able to replicate that Damir Hadzovic performance of his. I really like Moicano in the spot to nail that sub. It seems to be pretty straightforward and easy here, but the Jay Herbert striking looks like it could definitely challenge Moicano and definitely land on the chin of his. Also, like Weezy was saying, 3 out of the last 4 fights for Moicano, he gets dusted. But big names, right? Jose Aldo, Korean Zombie, Rafael Fisayev, who's obviously on his way to the top now. But I really do think that we'll see a lot of success here from Moicano in terms of landing the takedown. And the last thing I'll say before I drop it on over to Jonah here, Prize Picks, another Prize Pick tip for you guys here. They actually set the takedowns for Moicano at 1.5. Those cheeky bastards. Yeah, I mean, because I could see an instance where, he lands a takedown. Maybe Herbert finds his way back to his feet, and that's where you get the second takedown. But it could also just be one takedown. That's all he needs to wrap up the submission. So I'm staying away from that Prize Pick spot there because I thought they were very cheeky by adding that hook on the one there. But I do think Moicano wins. I think he drags this fight down with relative ease. I found it interesting that he was actually not the much shorter guy here, but shorter guy, because he's usually the one tower overing the featherweights when he was down at 145. But now up here at 155, he doesn't have that anymore. But Jay Herbert is definitely one of those guys on the taller end of the 155-pound division. But I don't think it's going to matter for him here. I think Moicano will land that takedown, find that submission. Rear naked choke is probably the best way to go about it. I think he'll eventually find that back and sink that shit in. So I'm going Moicano Moicano early here. And lastly, the under 2.5. Got to bang on that. I just don't see this going over 12.5 minutes. I know Jonah over there smirking and giggling. I know he's all over that line as well. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw a video that you and John Kelly dropped on the Twitter sphere saying that you got some pretty good CLV on that. So I think you guys got a pretty good line on that. So I'll actually whip it on over to you. But final prediction for me, Moicano first round submission. Jonah, hit him.
Cool. Yeah, there was a video out there of John flexing a CLV. John's my co-host, was obviously on the show here with Locke last week. He got minus 166. I came on the show and I was thinking I have to find a way to get some jabs back at John, because he was on the show last week making fun of me, all that kind of stuff. But the first thing I say about the guy is I have to praise him for making a good play. So that hurts me inside a little bit. But I'm also on the under. I played under 2.5, minus 140. I just think it's a great spot, and I think actually Weezy and Locke, you guys both touched on something. Weezy, you mentioned Moicano has only shot 13 takedowns, landed 7 of them. Locke, you were talking about how it was an insta tap against Hadzovic. I think part of the reason why he hasn't landed that many takedowns is because he's a decent wrestler, above average, I would say, especially for a guy who's primarily a jiu-jitsu player, but he's a very good passer once the fight hits the ground. He has 3 wins via submission in the UFC. They've come on a combined 3 takedowns across the whole fight and 1 minute and 50 seconds of control time. That means when he gets someone down, he is passing into a dominant position or a position where he's able to lock up some sort of submission. And against Jai Herbert, I think that's going to be decently easy. You go back and watch Jai Herbert in Cage Warriors. I always forget, the regional fights always mesh together in my head when I go back and have watched someone's regional tape. I think it was a Steve O'Keefe fight, which Herbert won by KO in the first round. I think he gives his back standing early in the fight and then gets mounted, all before he wins via knockout. And this is a guy who his age isn't listed anywhere. He's 7-7 in Cage Warriors. This is not a Renato Moicano level grappler. And I think Moicano goes in there, and I think the first takedown is pretty much an insta tap. I think he'll get to a dominant position. That submission in round 1 line that was talked about, plus 500 on FanDuel. I hadn't looked to that myself because I just played the under. I think that's decent. In terms of the striking, Moicano's durability, I don't have a super, strong take on it. He basically gets countered with the same shot over and over again, and his defense is pretty poor. So I don't know if it's an issue where he's chinny or he just has poor defense, but it might not matter if he isn't going to change it. You know what I mean? So he's been cracked to this point 3 times. He continues to make the same mistakes. Herbert, I think, is live to win a knockout, but I honestly would favor Moicano in the striking. His striking metrics are very strong. I think he's kind of run into some killers. You mentioned the guys he's lost to. Jai Herbert is an explosive striker. He's got some decent physical tools, a nice 1-2. I don't think he's a level of striker like Korean Zombie, Fiziev, those guys that are going out there and sparking Moicano. So I'll take Moicano pretty much however he wants. And for my sake, for my heart rate during the fight, I hope it's just first round submission, shoots the early takedown, gets to a good position, locks up the submission. So I guess this might be a consensus play. Maybe John will ruin it at the end, but it sounds like all 3 of us like Moicano to win via submission in the first round.
All right, Jonah. All right, John, bring this one home for us. You like the under here, or are you going to go with the over?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing here. I got Moicano inside the distance. It was at plus 125 on FanDuel still, and Herbert needs a knockout to win. He's not winning minutes here with the striking, and I also agree with what Jonas said. Is it's not so much as a durability issue. It's just his defensive reads aren't really there, and it's against elite level strikers, and it's typically pretty early on in the fight too. So, I mean, maybe Herbert catches him early on here and pulls off the upset, but I don't see it. I think Moicano outstrikes him on the feet. He's going to get that easy takedown, and I think he's going to tap him out in round 1. So we're all on the same page here. No need to spend too much time. I got 1 unit on Moicano inside the distance.
All right. I love it. I love it. I love it when it's a consensus play, especially when we got guys from all different viewpoints for sure. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. Second fight on the main card. We got Nicholas Dalby going up against Tim Means, and I believe I'm going to be kicking this one off for you guys. I like Tim Means here. I think that this is a good spot for him to go out there and light up Nicholas Dalby like a Christmas tree. The only concern that I have is I want to see what's his face? Tim Means go out there. I just saw Sidney Outlaw beat Moz by technical submission. Did anybody actually see what the technical submission was? There's only 16 seconds left in the fight as well. Okay. Yeah, I guess nobody
Not
saw
me.
it.
I'm watching. I'm
You're watching
tracking
PFL.
basketball. No, I'm not. I'm not watching anything. I got my full attention on the show, Lock. I wasn't watching
Professional right there.
PFL.
Professional right there. All right. Yeah. What I was saying, I want to see Tim Means actually distance himself from the durability issues that we've seen from him in his last couple fights, right? What's his face? Daniel Rodriguez gets a club and sub on him before that obviously get knocked out. There just are some concerns for me. Now, I see a lot of people backing up, Tim Means' durability issues with the Mike Perry fight, but I think that's unfair to do. I mean, like Mike Perry at this point in time, we know he's not the Mike Perry that blast onto the UFC scene by destroying and killing Kyle Reyes' UFC career. I think that's Alex Reyes. I believe it was Alex Reyes that he elbowed and destroyed there. But all Mike Perry had in that fight was that first takedown, and after Tim Means was able to get back to his feet, he seemed completely deflated. Obviously, you guys remember that was the fight that he missed the weight by a pretty bad margin. I think it was 5 or 6 pounds that he missed weight that night. But it seemed like he was completely deflated. No power on his shots, was telegraphing everything. Tim Means could see everything that was coming his way and just literally jabbed and jabbed his face off for the majority of 15 minutes and won that fight. I think he'll have the same success here against Nicholas Dalby, but I think Dalby will have a little bit more resistance in regards to being more explosive and possibly finding that chin of Tim Means, which I still have question marks about. If I could fully lay to rest those question marks regarding his durability, I'd be all over Tim Means in the spot. I do have a little sprinkle on him just on track and unofficially myself, just because I do think that he should win this fight. And I think he wins it by a decision because he's just going to go out there, stay disciplined, not fall over his punches or anything like that. Just stay on the outside, let Nicholas Dalby just walk in to those jabs, walk into those counters. And again, I just don't think that Nicholas Dalby is that good. I think the best way Dalby, or best path to victory for Dalby here, is to implement his grappling. Try to take Tim Means down. Try to be the imposing figure here. Try to just muscle him and just out-grapple him that way. But Tim Means has decent get-ups from what I recall. He can get back to his feet. His jiu-jitsu is not that half bad. And I just don't think that Dalby is that good to deal with a guy like Tim Means, who just has such a massive striking advantage, in my opinion. So I'm going Tim Means. I'm actually going to be going with Tim Means via decision as well, because I think there's some decent value there. Tim Means by decision is currently at plus 185. Yeah, I like that spot for him to go out there and just touch up Nicholas Dalby over 15 minutes. Jonah, are you giving a little bit more credence to Dalby in the spot, or do you think that this is a great spot for Means to go out there and show out?
I think it's a good spot for Means. I bet him minus 130. It was my only money line play for the week. I added one that we'll talk about a little bit later on in the show, in the main event. I just think Means is significantly better than Dalby everywhere. I think historically a lot of people, myself included, have kind of wrote off Dalby because we thought he didn't deserve the nod against Daniel Rodriguez. And to be clear, I still think that, but he has a habit of just kind of making fights close. And I think at some point we have to accept that may be predictive to some extent. Like, he's a guy, I don't want to say he tries hard because it's a fucking cage fight. Everyone tries hard, but he's someone who goes out there and he's very enthusiastic about trying to get his game going. And he plays that dance around game on the outside with the kicks decently well, and then he'll cage push, go for the takedowns. He has had some fortunate decisions go his way. The stand-up against Alex Oliveira comes to mind as well. There's no doubt that he has run hot to some extent to get to the point where he is. And I just think Tim Means is better than him. I think Means has better cardio. I think he's a much sharper striker. I think the pocket exchanges will not be close here. Look, you might be able to dance around on the outside against some guys in the UFC and land these leg kicks. I mean, Tim Means is a pressure fighter who will move forward, throws hard, throws straight down the middle, lands a lot of volume too, over 5 strikes landed per minute in a massive sample at this point for Tim Means. So is there some concern that he's getting up there in age and has not been, super consistent? I don't know. He's winning the Nico Price fight. Didn't look great. Daniel Rodriguez fight was not really winning. He basically got knocked out twice in that fight. But I thought he looked pretty good against Mike Perry. And say what you want about Mike Perry, but it's important to think about the market. I bet Tim Means at even money against Mike Perry his last time out. So in hindsight, it is very easy to say Mike Perry just had a kid. He was tweeting about how shitty it was to cut weight. But in the moment, the market thought that was a 50-50 fight. And it clearly wasn't to me. And I think Means is kind of historically underrated, Dalby historically overrated. So I see scenarios where this fight is close, but to me, it feels like Nicholas Dalby, his median win outcome is like a close, sketchy decision. So minus 130 for Tim Means, I'm pretty comfortable laying that number. I bet him for a unit. I think it was last night. The number's pretty widely available at this point. So Means is the side for me.
Yeah, John, I was kind of shocked to see the line move as drastically as it did after the opener. It was roughly around minus 200 for Tim Means. It seemed like a lot of love for Nicholas Dalby came in, but now it's starting to settle around that minus 130, minus 140-ish range for Tim Means. Do you agree with the line movement? And then obviously, how do you actually see this fight playing out?
I agree with both of what both of you said so far. I disagree with the line movement, actually. Like, when I was looking at the card, when the card ends on Saturday night, you look at the next week's card, all the lines, Means at minus 150 stood out to me right away. I thought he was value at that. So I'm going to end up playing him at whatever he's at, before the fight, before the event starts tomorrow. Minus 135, I'm fine with that. And yeah, I agree with what everybody said. I just think that Means has the more consistent offense, insane, incredible fighter. I tweeted out not that long ago, he's one of the most underrated action fighters ever. I mean, has the guy ever been in a boring fight? And I mean, his past few fights, even late into his career, he's still producing like really entertaining fights. So you got to love the Dirty Bird, and I'm riding with him here. I do agree that Dalby's best path to victory is going to be grappling. I mean, I did think his kicks looked pretty good against Daniel Rodriguez. I did score that fight for Dalby and, had a small bet on him there. So obviously I wasn't going to be looking too hard to score that fight for Rodriguez. But I thought that his kicks were pretty effective from the outside there. He threw hard body kicks, and maybe he could have some success with that here. But I think Tim Means is a lot more aggressive at getting into the pocket, landing his hands consistently. And I also think Tim Means is a better kicker than Daniel Rodriguez too. So I think Means' defensive grappling is good enough to avoid the takedowns, and he's just going to be landing the more consistent strikes. So I think Means should be more like minus 170 here, honestly. So I'm looking to lock in 1.5 or either 2 in a bet on Tim Means in the next 12 or 14 hours here.
I love it. I love it. Wheezy. Earlier on in Tim Means' UFC career, before he had initially gotten cut, it seemed like the easy path to victory was to take him down. You got guys like Jorge Masvidal landing 6 takedowns, Danny Castillo landing 6 takedowns, Neil Magny landing 4 takedowns. But then later on in his career, especially after his Bilal Muhammad fight, I believe I did the calculations. You might even have it before me, but I believe opponents after his Bilal Muhammad fight have gone 2 of 17 on takedowns, takedown attempts. So at least it shows that he's trying to make some progress there, so that he can keep the fight in his realm, which is that striking realm. But how do you see this fight playing out? And are there any statistics that actually jump off the page to you here that leads you to believe that one side is going to win?
Well, it's not so much the statistics. This is more like one of those fights that's like the eye test for me. The biggest problem with Means is he's 37 years old, but Dalby's 36, so we can throw that out, that we don't have to worry about Means' age here. And if we look at experience, man, 45 professional fights for Tim Means compared to 25 for Dalby. And then we look at UFC experience, man, 23 UFC fights for Tim Means, only 7 for Nicholas Dalby. The thing about Dalby is I mean, all you have to do is go back and watch this guy's career. You need to murder this guy to get him out of there. And no matter how much the fight is going for you at the beginning, Dalby can come back. I mean, he got his ass kicked the first 2 rounds against Till, and then came back and 10-8'd them in the 3rd round to make that one a draw. You watch one of his Cage Warriors fights, dude. They had to stop the fight in the 3rd round because both guys were bleeding so bad that the canvas was covered with blood. I mean, I forget. I think it was Goddard who was the referee. He goes, "This is ridiculous. I'm stopping the fight." The whole thing was covered with blood. I mean, like, Means could choke out Dalby, murder him. They could throw a shovel into the ring. He could dig a grave. They could dump Dalby's lifeless corpse in there. And before the referee would raise his hand, you'd see fucking Dalby's hand come out like Friday the 13th, like Jason. Dude, you can't kill this guy. The best way I'm going to see to play this fight is if you're on the Dalby side, play him by decision. If you're on the Means side, play him by decision. I don't think either one of these guys is finishing the other one. There's not a whole lot in the stats that I see in terms of somebody having a major advantage anywhere, but the striking numbers, they do favor Means. We have seen Means get taken down a lot in the past, but like you were mentioning, he hasn't been taken down lately. He's kind of cleared up that hole in his game. And then if you look at Nicholas Dalby, I think this is what I looked at before the show. I think he's 1 for 9 on his last 9 takedown attempts in the UFC. So if you're looking for that path to victory for Dalby to win via grappling, it might not be there. So I'm on the Means side. I don't think there's any chance he can finish Dalby, though. So I think if you like Means, you might even be able to get more value. Just go Means by decision, because you need to murder Dalby to get him out of there. And even once he's dead, he might come back from the dead. So, I'm going Tim Means here. I'm going to pick him by decision. And I think he's a little bit better everywhere. It's just a funny way that Dalby seems to get fights that he didn't quite deserve. It always makes me a little bit nervous when I'm betting against somebody like that.
Go ahead, John.
Personally, I think the threat of a knockout from Means is enough to pass on that decision line because I mean the dude does really crack. He dropped Alves, he dropped Staropoli with that head kick, and I think that Dalby was also dropped by Jesse Ronson not that long ago too. So
Yeah.
I think the Southpaw, they're always so bad for Dalby that I think that the chance of a knockout here is good enough that Means money line is the way to go instead of that decision prop. But I guess my official pick is going to be Means decision. With all that being said,
I see that as well. And big shout out to Liz Carmouche getting a 35-second knockout victory over Kana Watanabe very, very quickly, getting her out there, standing TKO up against the cage. We all knew Watanabe had nothing to give in terms of the striking realm in this fight. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. We got the 4 fights left here. Andre Fili against Daniel Pineda. And I'm glad I'm going last here because this is probably the fight that I feel least confident about outside of the Warley Alves and Jeremiah Wells fight. So in terms of odds, we got Mr. Andre Fili coming in at minus 225, Daniel Pineda plus 185. Jonah, I'm actually going to let you kick this one off, brother. How are you feeling about this matchup, and do you see any edge in this matchup at all?
So I do see an edge. I don't know if I see an edge in the money line, which is what you were having trouble with, Locks. I don't know if I could help you out here. My general breakdown on the fight is Andre Fili is someone who historically, I feel like I've always been higher on him than the market was. But at the same time, he's out here as minus 225 against Daniel Pineda. And I think that the value probably lies in his opponent. So, it's all fun and games to say, oh, yeah, I'm high on this guy, but am I really high on him if the market is actually higher on him than I am? So I think that's kind of an interesting dynamic with Fili. The thing about this fight is Daniel Pineda is very much a finisher. I mean, there's no real way to break down. I don't want to oversimplify things, but there's no way to break down this fight without acknowledging the fact that Pineda has won 27 fights and all 27 are inside the distance. And, there's a couple of ways to look at that, right? Like the first way you could look at it is the guy doesn't have the gas tank or the minute winning skills to win a decision. Or you could look at it on the other hand and say, this guy's a pretty damn good finisher, 27 finishes. And these aren't against scrubs. He was in the UFC. He had 3 UFC finishes in his first stint with the company a decade ago at this point, goes to Bellator, spends time in PFL, has finishes there as well. Like Daniel Pineda is a capable finisher, I think at really any level of MMA. The problem lies in his ability to win minutes outside of the first and second round. And with Andre Fili, it's kind of the opposite, where I feel like Fili has the skill set to win fights by bigger margins than he does, but he kind of has trouble stepping on the gas. 9 of his last 10 fights have gone to decision. This is a guy who we've really seen grow up inside the UFC. He's been fighting in the UFC for like 8 years at this point and is only 31 years old. With Fili, I think he's the cleaner striker for sure. What concerns me about laying a minus 225 price on him is he hasn't looked great off his back. In the Bryce Mitchell fight, I actually bet him in that spot. In hindsight, terrible bet. Bryce Mitchell went out there and thoroughly dominated him. And Bryce Mitchell is a great grappler in terms of submissions. And I think he's actually pretty good positionally. I think I originally had underrated him positionally, but he really went out there and was able to hold down Andre Fili for large portions of that fight. And it wasn't a blowout by any means, but I didn't like the signs I saw from Fili on bottom. Sadiq Youssef, he spent time on his back as well, was dropped by Charles Jourdain his last time out. That being said, just Pineda, there's probably some value on plus 190 in my opinion. I just don't love backing fighters who I feel dead if they're 7.5 minutes into the fight. And maybe that's a mental block for me, something that, if you're betting a plus 190 is already baked into the line. It's just not a spot I love to target. So what I actually did here is I played the under. I played does not go the distance, minus 110. It's another violence bet for me this week. It just feels like one of those spots where I mentioned the stat, Fili's been to decision 9 of his last 10, but Pineda is the definition of a kill or be killed fighter. He will go out there and give it his all to get the finish. And if he doesn't, it's not like he's going out there losing a lot of decisions either. The guy has over 40 pro fights. Yeah, he's lost 5 decisions, has never won one, but he's been finished 9 times in a multitude of ways. So I know that Fili has been a little bit less aggressive than I would have liked to seen in the past, but I think Pineda probably puts him in a bad position or two in the first round. And if he doesn't, he's going to be in big trouble because I think Fili is the much cleaner striker. So yeah, I see a little bit of wrestling upside for Pineda in the first round or two, potential submission if Fili doesn't look great off his back. But I think it's Fili late, Pineda early. My official prediction will be Fili KO in round 2.
I like it. John, hella disrespect on Daniel Pineda and his return to the UFC when he went up against Herbert Burns. I'm sure a couple of us cashed on that crazy line there. It was roughly around plus 220, plus 240. Goes out there, beats Herbert Burns, but doesn't have as good of a second stint or a second fight in the UFC, obviously getting knocked out by Cub Swanson last time around. What do you think he brings to the table here against Cub Swanson? And do you ultimately think he gets his hand raised once again as an underdog?
I really agree with most of what Jaynes said. The only thing I really disagree with is the inside the distance. I just think that Fili isn't as much of a finishing threat enough to where I think that the fight could go the distance. I think that Fili will run away with it in rounds 2 and 3. Pineda will compete early. And moneyline side, it is dog or pass pre-fight, but look to get in on that Andre Fili live bet line because I think Pineda is going to have a good 5 to 7 minutes, and then he's going to start to slow down. Not much of an original opinion here. I do agree that Fili is kind of underrated by the market. I think the guy's a great striker. He also is a really capable wrestler. I mean, he hit those blast double legs on good fighters, Dennis Bermudez, Andre Fili. I mean, the guy can wrestle too. And I think that's going to be a pretty good path for him here because Herbert Burns was able to get a good amount of top time in their fight. And I think a guy with good cardio and good wrestling, Fili should be able to get takedowns if he wants to as well. And also, as Jaynes said, for Fili, Pineda might want to look to hit offensive takedowns because Fili hasn't looked so great off of his back. He got stuck on his back versus Sadiq Youssef versus Bryce Mitchell in all 3 rounds. So if I'm Pineda, I think my best chance is to offensively grapple, but I just don't trust his cardio to do that for more than a round or 2. So I'm going to pick Fili 29-28 decision here. I think he drops the first round, but comes back to win the next 2.
Look at that. We got 2 pretty solid, differentiating opinions there in terms of one guy going with the under and one guy going with the over. Weezy, how are you feeling about this one? You siding with John, or you think this is going to be a violence one, or you think that John is more on the money with this fight going a distance?
I'm going to side with Jonah on this one for this reason, and I think what we're getting here is with the we're getting a really nice line here because 9 out of 10's Fili's last 10 fights have went to decision, right? But when you got a killer be killed fighter like Pineda, that's when you're talking about, that's when you get the value on the fight not going to decision because like the bookies will see that, Fili's been going to decision 9 out of 10 times, but this guy Pineda, he's fury for those first 4 to 7 minutes. And then after that, and not only that, he's 35 years old, okay? We talk about a guy like Fili who's got 29 pro fights, but he's only 30 years old. And then you see an experienced guy like Pineda with 43 professional fights, but he's got 5 more years on that body of his. He's got 14 more fights, a lot more miles on that body, and a lot more losses, dude. 14 losses compared to 8 for Fili. And, Pineda has finished 100% of his wins, so you got to love the violence bet there. Andre Fili, 57% of his wins overall, and only 33% of his wins have been finished in the UFC. So, I think the value is on Fili finishing inside the distance, or the fight doesn't go to decision simply because 9 out of 10 Fili's last 10 fights have went to decision because Pineda is just such a killer be killed fighter. But I see Fili being a much better striker here. He's going to have to stay out of the way of those heavy leg kicks that Pineda throws. But the thing that bothered me in the Pineda performance against Cub Swanson, the striking defense was absolutely awful. Everything that Cub threw hit Pineda. And a lot of guys that wouldn't be as tough as Cub Swanson would have quit from those leg kicks. You could tell he was in bad shape from those leg kicks, and Pineda came damn close to making it where the guy couldn't even stand anymore. But he's only got about 6 or 7 minutes of gas. And I see Fili being a much more technical striker here. I see him using that jab, and I see him landing it every single time because Pineda's striking defense is not looking good lately. I got to go with Fili. But, I agree with both of these guys, that it's either Pineda early or Fili late. This is the kind of fight that we have here. We have a killer be killed fighter who comes out to murder people early. And if he doesn't get it done, he's going to gas. And I think that Fili, being as tough as he is, being as experienced as he is, and really being a much better distance striker than Pineda, I see Fili knocking him out in the 3rd round.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jonah.
I don't want to beat a dead horse here, and certainly Locke, I'll let you go in a second because we got a score to settle here. We got 2-1 on Inside the Distance, Wheezy and I against Martian. One thing I just wanted to point out is, we mentioned 9 of Fili's last 10 have gone to decision, and I think that is a meaningful statistic because it clearly is baked into the line. But if we look at those fights individually, their situations, there's been 5 knockdowns. I just pulled it up. There's been 5 knockdowns over those 10 fights. Like, there have been finishing opportunities. I feel like it's he's ran bad to not have finishes in his fights. Whereas a guy like Nick Dalby, if you run his career back 100 times over, he probably isn't in the same spot he is now because he loses some of those close decisions he won. I think if you run back Fili's last 10 fights, they end inside the distance more than that 1 out of 10 times. And it's one of those things where he gets offensive takedowns, and he's not really a submission threat per se, but if he has a gassed guy underneath him, he's going to be capable of winning the fight on top. Whereas in other fights where Fili's gotten on top, it's been more of like a positionally sound minute winning sort of thing, as opposed to here. I really think his finishing upside wherever the fight goes, and as does Pineda. But I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think I made my point clear. Locke, take it away, bud.
Yeah, look at this guy taking the host duties over here, but I appreciate it. No, I see the angle that you're coming from, but what ultimately I come on, or the side that I come out on, is actually on the John side here. I do think that we see Fili actually go out there and just stick behind that jab, and I truly believe he has one of the better jabs inside the UFC when he's on. Like, when he's on, he has a nice log jabs right down the middle. He's able to keep his opponents at distance, and I think that's what he's going to have to do here, especially with a bull like Pineda in front of him, who's always going to be coming forward and is pretty much an all offensive guy. The whole thing comes down to how much can Pineda truly take here. I think he's going to have some trouble in terms of dealing with Pineda is going to have trouble dealing with guys that are able to have much more success later in fights, as I believe that Andre Fili will have here as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I do believe Fili wins this fight. I'm going to take him by decision. I think he withstands whatever Pineda actually brings to him early in this fight, and then takes over in the second and third rounds. I think 29-28 is right on the money, as John had said. All right, let's move on to the next fight here. Probably the fight that I'm looking forward to most. We got Harney Barcelos going up against Timur Valiev. I think a lot of people are very excited for this fight. We got -210 on Barcelos, +190 for Valiev. And I'm actually going to hand this over to John to kick off the breakdowns here. And I'm just going to run to the washroom because my bladder is about to explode, and y'all don't want an accident on camera right here. So, John, take it away, and I will be right back.
Yeah, it's funny. We all took bathroom breaks like one after the other in these last 15 minutes. So to start this off with Barcelos, I think that Barcelos deserves about -200. What's the line at right now? I think last time I checked it was -230.
Yeah, -225-ish, 230.
I think that's getting a little bit too far, because I do favor Barcelos here. I think I give him the biggest advantage in the striking, and I just think we're going to have a bit of a puncher versus kicker difference going on between these two guys. I think that Barcelos lands the strikes to the head a lot more consistently, while Valiev likes kind of kicking from the outside, body kicks, and a lot of his attacks don't really target the head. So I see Barcelos getting the better of the striking exchanges by targeting the head, by having more success with his boxing. I mean, the guy has power in his hands. He's real fast. I mean, I'm not rating off Valiev in the striking completely, but I do give an advantage to Barcelos in the striking. And in the grappling, I think that Valiev's grappling is getting a bit disrespected. He did get taken down by Trevin Jones. He didn't look too great on bottom there, but that was after he nearly finished Jones. He almost got the TKO in round 1, kind of gassed out there. But if you go back and watch Valiev's PFL fights, his Russian fights, he actually is very hard to take down. It's got really good takedown defense, especially from the single leg. I mean, the guy has incredible balance and flexibility. And even when he gets put on bottom, he's pretty good at sweeping and getting back up to his feet. So I don't think Barcelos is going to have an easy time out grappling him at all. I think he's going to only look -200 if he keeps the fight standing, while I think Valiev kind of thrives off those takedown defense type of fights where he can defend those takedowns, maybe get his own grappling going. So I'm going to be siding with Harney Barcelos here. I think I would cap him closer to -190, 200 at the max. And Valiev is going to compete everywhere. I just don't think I give him enough advantages to straight out pick him or give him too much of a chance to win. So I'm expecting a great fight between two prospects, but I'm going to be going with Harney Barcelos by decision as the pick.
I'll take it from here. Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said here. As bettors, we got to look at what that line is, and I think Barcelos is better everywhere. I mean, the bookies love him. This guy is coming off as -1100 favorite against Huachin, a -380 favorite versus Taha, I believe he was like minus 550 against Halabar or something like that. I mean, he's had some big lines, and he usually looks that good, even when he does have that big of a line. But it's almost impossible to envision a scenario where Valiev is plus 175 against, I mean, anybody else in the division. You know, it kind of looks like Valiev is being disrespected a little bit just because Barcelos is so well thought of. And I wish Barcelos was younger, man. He's 34 years old, and it's a shame. His last fight, he was supposed to fight Assunção, and Assunção dropped out. And then they fed him Marcelo Rojo, and then Rojo didn't make weight. You know, this guy needs to go now. Barcelos needs to go now. He's very good. He's very well thought of. That win against Said Nurmagomedov is a big win. That win against Chris Gutierrez was very impressive. But the other 3 wins, you know, Halabar, Huachin, Taha, they don't knock your socks off, really. And he didn't even look that great against Huachin in the first round. So, you know, I think Barcelos is better here. I'm picking him to win by decision. I think Barcelos' wrestling background is very good. He's a member of the Brazilian national wrestling team. This guy's got great hands. He's got great Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His takedown percentage is 56% in the UFC, 9 out of 16. When this guy goes for takedowns, he gets them. And he's out-controlled his opponents 28% to 3%. So this guy, he's just been dominant. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to say I'm going with Barcelos here. I think he should get the job done, but I don't feel safe betting him up here at minus 230, 240. Maybe as a cheeky little parlay piece, but I just think it's, you know, like John said, I think I'd like to see him line maybe around 180, 190 minus, somewhere around there.
I believe that should tee me up in terms of knowing that John doesn't like the line on Barcelos. And is he who you picked to win, or did you pick Valiev?
Yeah, I still picked Barcelos by decision, but just said he should be maybe minus 190, like Weezy said.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the take from everybody this week, and I think everybody pretty much agrees. Like, this is a fight between 2 up-and-comers that are, even though they might be up there in age, or more so on the Barcelos side of things, they have a lot to prove here, and I think that both guys, you know, I hate seeing these situations where guys are, you know, on the rise, and, you know, the UFC is looking for new blood to promote, and guys that are fun to watch, entertaining to watch, and both these guys tick all those boxes. Now they're just matching them up together, and one of them has to take a step back while one of them jumps forward, and it's really shitty to see. The other matchups that remind me of that, like Said Nurmagomedov against Ricardo Ramos, before we truly found out what Ramos brings to the table. Even another one, Barcelos is involved with him against Nurmagomedov. Another one where you're kind of like, you know, putting a prospect a step back due to just matching them up together here. And I think that both you guys are on the money here. I think that Barcelos is the rightfully favored guy, and I do think he actually ends up winning this fight. But the line is just a little bit too wide that I don't agree that he should be this big of a favorite. I think he's the more efficient and better minute-winning striker compared to Timur Valiev, who's a little bit more explosive, likes to throw his spinning shit, you know, his flying shit, whatever it may be. And then when he needs to, he can lean on his grappling on the Valiev side that I'm speaking about, just as he did in his fight against Martin Day. You know, I mean, he wanted to get that first one inside the UFC after especially that blunder of his first fight in the UFC against Trevin Jones. But here, I think that even if he decides to go out there and wrestle against Barcelos, I think he's going to have trouble having much success in terms of implementing control time or even landing takedowns here, let alone even controlling Barcelos on the ground. So I think Barcelos will keep this fight on the feet. It will play primarily out on the feet, and I give Barcelos the advantage here. There's times when he's whipping his leg kicks so he looks like a young Jose Aldo. I mean, there's been so many people out there that are just like, even physically speaking, he looks like Jose Aldo, like from afar. If you're like, oh shit, is that Jose? It's no. It's a poor man's Jose, but he still has a ton of skill. I do think that Barcelos definitely has like top 7-ish potential, and maybe could, you know, get a crack at that title if he is active enough. Another guy, just like we were talking about earlier in the card, I can't remember who it was, Julia Avila, somebody that if they stay active enough, they can find themselves in a top 5 spot. And I think that's the thing here with Barcelos. I think he gets the win. I think I agree with the decision prop as well. I think he wins this fight by decision. He picks part of Valiev from the outside, leg kicks galore, slow down Valiev, and then get your hands going. Valiev, potential durability issues, but I'm not willing to really run to the window to bet the KO prop, especially considering the circumstances that surrounded Valiev getting finished by Trevin Jones. He threw everything on the kitchen sink at Trevin Jones in that first minute or first round, and then I had nothing to give in that second round. And I think that knockout came from exhaustion and just not really being in it anymore. And I think he definitely learned his lesson, which is why he took a very disciplined approach in the Martin Day fight. And I think he's going to take the same lesson here against Barcelos. And I think his durability should check out, and Barcelos should win this fight via decision regardless. But yeah, line is a little bit too wide. Jonah, are you going to just echo our same sentiments here? How are you feeling about this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's probably the best fight on the card. I mean, I think the main event is pretty great. I'm like on record a bunch of times saying like heavyweight main events should be, completely thrown out the window unless it's for a title fight. The heavyweight main event this week's pretty good, but like I think the consensus is that this is probably the best fight on the card. So I'll give it a little bit of time here, despite the fact that I don't have a ton of new stuff to add. What it comes down to me in this fight is we can talk about like the little tendencies that these guys have that differ from one another, but all in all, I think that they're decently similar in the fact that they're both well-rounded, kind of succeed. John touched on it, how Valiev succeeds with his single leg takedown. I think both these guys do pretty well in like scrambling scenarios. I just think it's going to be one of those fights that plays out fairly competitive. And when we have a sport that plays out over the course of a long season and you bet a money line, you can a team could be worse than the other one, but you're betting them kind of purely based on value. For MMA, you're betting based on value as well. But for me personally, in an underdog, I like having a guy who I know he has one way that he is certainly better than his opponent and he could win that, whether it be in the clinch, whether it be jiu-jitsu, wrestling, distance striking. And for me, I think this fight is close everywhere. It just feels like Barcelos has Valiev covered by the slimmest of margins in every single category. So I think a value bet on Valiev is fine. I'll pick Barcelos. I think he wins a decision. I think it's a really high-level fight. You hate that one guy has to lose, but at the same time, like, Barcelos is 34. Like, we got to expedite that title run, like, right fucking now if he wants to have a shot at it. So I don't mind the matchmaking. Like, I'm very much looking forward to the fight. Yeah, I'll take Barcelos. Should be a competitive fight. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I definitely think that this is one of two fights. Another one that we'll be talking about in the main event, where a lot of people are going to be value hunting here on the underdog, and they might still end up ripping up their tickets come Saturday night, trying to hunt that value. But that does bring us to our co-main event here. We got Ovince St. Preux taking on short notice Tanner Boser, who steps in for, I believe, Maxime Grishin, who also was not able to get his visa to get over to the US to actually have this fight. In terms of odds, we got Boser around -170, +150 with the return on OSP. I'm actually going to let Uncle Weezy kick this one off for us. Who are you liking in this heavyweight co-main event slot?
Nobody. It's a weird one, man. I've been just furious with Ovince St. Preux for years about not using his wrestling. And I mean, if we look at, we got 23 UFC fights and he's only attempted 44 takedowns. And he's gotten 14 of them. But, he does so well on top, and with somebody like Boser, who has shown that he can be taken down, he can be controlled. We just saw it with Latifi. If I could feel confident that Ovince was going to go to his wrestling, I'd feel really good about betting him here. But I don't feel good about it. And he gets out controlled by his opponents, 13% to 23%. He's getting controlled. I'd really like to see Ovince go for the takedowns. He doesn't really do it. He's got a little bit of a power advantage, but in terms of volume, he's completely outdone. Boser is going to outvolume him. He's going to throw the more variety of strikes. And I think he's going to just outwork St. Preux on the feet. I would have to go with Tanner Boser by decision here. But St. Preux's power, he can definitely hurt you. And if he gets on top of you, man, he is so good there. I think there are ways for St. Preux to win this fight. I think he could win it if he went to his wrestling, but I don't predict that he will. So I got to go with Tanner Boser by decision.
Yeah, I'm going to be leaning with you as well here with Tanner Boser. I do think that even though he did, get grapple fucked last time around by Ilir Latifi, and then obviously lost that Andrei Arlovski by the slimmest of margins, I think he still has a good shot to go out there and outvolume OSP. I just don't think that OSP will be able to keep up with the pace and volume that Boser is going to be putting on him. And OSP could have, slight success with the takedown early in this fight and maybe threaten with a submission or something like that. But I don't think that he's going to be able to secure something. And historically speaking, OSP hasn't really had the greatest gas tank, and I think that's going to cause him issues here against Boser, who can put on a solid pace from minute 1 to minute 15. Go out there, leg kicks, combination, stick and move. We all know the Boser game plan. I think we're going to see a classic style here from Mr. Boser, and he should be able to take home that decision victory. Last thing I'll say about this too, I think that Boser, there is a little bit of a question mark for me in regards to how he actually wins this fight. Historically speaking, he's a decision machine. But like, given him getting kind of fucked by judges in his last 2 fights, he might go out there with a little bit more of a vendetta and try to just keep the judges out of this. Try to get rid of OSP inside the distance. I could see that happening. I do believe that OSP has some cardio and durability issues. Not to mention the guy's 38 years old, and that kind of crept up on me when I started doing the research on this fight. I didn't realize OSP was actually that far up there in terms of age, but I definitely think that's going to play a factor in this fight. But stylistically speaking, I just don't think that OSP has the greatest top control, which should allow Boser to get back to his feet relatively easily here. And then as long as it stays on the feet, there is no way that OSP can go strike for strike with Boser in terms of keeping up with the volume. So I like Boser here. I think he wins pretty convincingly. I know the narrative around this whole fight is that, Boser pretty much been in quarantine since his last fight, hasn't really been able to train properly or anything like that. But this seems like one of those fights that he can just go out there and it's going to be almost, elementary to him in terms of just, a routine type performance. Give me that classic Tanner Boser, and that should be enough to beat a 38-year-old OSP going up in weight once again, who also lost a fight that might play out similar to this one to Ben Rothwell. Like, who does Ben Rothwell beat by decision nowadays? OSP is who he beats by decision nowadays, and I think that's what's exactly going to happen with Tanner Boser here as well. Jonah, am I too high on Boser in this spot, or do you think that OSP actually has the chops to go out there and pull off the upset?
I don't know if you're too high on Tanner Boser. I'll say I came into the week. I saw Tanner Boser minus 150. I believe it was on like BetMGM or something, and the line was moving, and it was 163 across the market. And I was thinking, if I'm going to bet this fight, I like the Boser side, I suppose. Minus 150 is short. I'll move in now before the whole market moves. And it was one of those things where I kind of sat there and I was like, you want to know what? I'll check if it's still there in an hour or two. And then it was 3 or 4 hours. And like subconsciously, I was just hoping that like the perceived value in my head would disappear in terms of the betting market, because I just don't feel comfortable having my money on this kind of fight. And of course, you can make money on literally anything that goes down in the world if you have a sufficient take on it that like you're confident in. And obviously, Locke, I mean, you just gave a great breakdown of this fight. You're confident in it. For me, it's just really hard to have confidence in Tanner Boser because, look, I think he wins the standing easily. I don't think we have to talk too much about that. OSP has that grappling route. The thing with OSP is, and I bet him in his last fight against Jamal Hill, when Weezy brought that up earlier, I was getting like PTSD live on the show. I mean, it's brutal with this guy. His game planning is brutal. He has 1 takedown since 2019. It was against Nzechukwu, and he won via submission in that fight. I mean, It seems like very elementary in my mind. And you don't want to oversimplify things. It's a cage fight. It's not that easy to shoot takedowns when people are trying to punch you in the face. But it's one of those things where, like, if OSP wrestles, I can't lay the chalk on Boser, but you also can't count on OSP to wrestle. And Boser, severe volume edge, better striker. It's not a thing where OSP is the bigger guy at light heavyweight. He's coming up on short notice. So I'll pick Boser. I'll pick it by decision. I generally think his power is a little bit overrated due to the back-to-back finishes earlier in his UFC career. So yeah, I'll take Boser by decision. I'm happy that I don't have a bet on the fight, though. I will say that.
John, are you actually one of those guys that has a bet on this fight? And secondly, how do you see it actually playing out?
Nah, no bet on it for me right now, but I do think there is value on Boser's money line price. Last time I checked, it was minus 170. Is it still hanging around there? Because minus 185 now. Actually, some places have it minus 170 still. I think he deserves minus 200 here because, in my opinion, OSP can only really win the fight with hitting takedowns because he's not a terrible striker. I mean, we did just see him outstrike Alonzo Menafield, but that was at 205. This is heavyweight, and in the Ben Rothwell fight, he looked significantly slower. He didn't throw he threw 90 punches in that entire fight, or 90 strikes in that entire fight, and he didn't attempt any takedowns. So, like you guys have been saying, if we knew that he would come in here and attempt a lot of takedowns like Iri Latifi did, then he would be the side. But he's not Iri Latifi. One big difference between Latifi's top game and OSP's is OSP is kind of looking to pass. He's looking to get his submissions going, while Latifi is content to just lay on top of you and do nothing. I mean, he won that fight against Boser with the most minimal amount of effort and output. It was just amazing how he pulled that off. And I bet against Boser 2 times in a row, Arlovsky at plus 250 or higher, and I was on Latifi decision there too. So I am skeptical of the guy in general, but I think this is a good spot for him. I think he's going to outstrike OSP, much more reliable striker, and I think he's probably going to get the knockout in rounds 2 or 3. I think my official pick here is going to be Boser knockout 2, and I might actually end up with some money on him at minus 170 if he stays around there, because as I mentioned, I think he does deserve minus 200, considering that I just can't trust OSP to look good unless he grapples, and he's not even reliable to do that. So I'm on Boser here.
Yeah, it was very head scratching actually for anybody backing Tanner Boser against Andrei Arlovski. It seems like he just put a couple more punches together, and it was just small moments for Arlovski that truly stole him that fight, at least in my opinion. And I think if Boser just throw a little bit more, which he's historically known to do, I don't know what it was. Maybe he was starstruck fighting a guy like Andrei Arlovski in front of him or something like that. Is what it is. Weezy, I'm actually gonna let you wrap this one up for us. How are you liking this heavyweight matchup?
You talking about Volkov?
You started already, right?
Yeah. I already did Boser.
What the hell? Jeez, my memory is so shot. All right, let's move on to the main event. I'm actually going to be kicking off the main event for you guys. Main event, we got Ciryl Gane going up against Alexander Volkov. In terms of odds here, we got minus 150-ish for Ciryl Gane, plus 140-ish for Alexander Volkov. And like I said, I'll kick it off here. It's pretty plain and simple, right? In terms of, we know that Volkov is a proven heavyweight, fought all over the world, fought the who's who, former Bellator champ, former M1 champ, on a decent winning streak right now, 2 wins in his last 2 fights, obviously over Walter Harris and Alistair Overeem, but he has a completely different beast in front of him here, a relatively unproven beast though in Ciryl Gane, right? To this point, I could say the best win that he has on his record is a 2020 Junior Dos Santos, and that's not really saying much, right? Like with Jairzinho Rosenstrike, I lump Rosenstrike into the category of Walt Harris, Derek Lewis, Francis Ngannou. Evade those bombs, and more than likely you're going to win this fight. And that's exactly what he was successful in doing against Jairzinho Rosenstrike. And obviously he didn't make many fans in that fight because he didn't engage as much as most people thought he would. But I believe he went 3 of 13 on takedown attempts in that fight. He was trying to get this fight to the ground to try to implement a grapple heavy approach. He was unsuccessful in doing so. But even when this fight was on the feet, he was very good in terms of just sticking and moving, staying on the outside and staying away from the big power of Jairzinho Rosenstrike. Here with Volkov, I don't think he has to worry too much about it, like a one-punch knockout type of thing with Volkov. Volkov is more of an accumulative striker. He kind of damages you and then slowly puts you away. His body kicks are absolutely nasty. Just ask Walt Harris. He's probably still hunched over from back in October. But I do think that Gane should be able to stick and move here again. I think his speed is ultimately going to be the difference maker in this fight. I don't think that Volkov will be able to catch him with the brunt of most of his shots, as Gane will do a good job of leg kicking, getting his combinations off, and getting back out of there. And I wouldn't even be surprised to see him go out there and throw in a takedown or 2 in this fight. Not saying that he's going to have ultimate success in terms of holding down Volkov the way that Curtis Blades did, but we still do have to give the props to Volkov in terms of being a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. So he definitely knows what he's doing off of his back. And given how relatively inexperienced Gane still is, I could definitely see him get caught in something if he is a little bit too lazy on top of Volkov and in his guard and doesn't even decide to pass in this situation. But I do think that the majority of this fight is going to be in the stand-up realm. Last night on the Prachnio Up show that I did with Cody, one thing that he brought up that he thought was going to be a staple of his game plan was leg kicks. Volkov keeps his leg out there. Obviously, he's a big dude, and it's going to be harder for him to pull his kicks away or his legs away. And I think he will get that lead leg chopped up, and that should slow down Volkov even more and give Ciryl Gane a further speed advantage in this fight. But I do think that the spot here is Gane via decision, plus 200. I like that line. I think this goes 5 rounds. I think both guys have solid durability. My main question mark as to why Gane isn't like a lock of the night type of play here for me is that there are those questions about how he reacts when he deals with adversity. Like, he hasn't fought anybody as skilled as Volkov at this point in time. Volkov is great all around. Like, he's fought, the power puncher in Jairzinho Rosenstrike, stayed away from the power, check, passed that test. Beats Junior Dos Santos, who was damaged goods by that time, check. He beats Tanner Boser at Tanner Boser's game. You know what I mean? Goes out there, outstrikes him for the majority of 15 minutes. So he's checking all these boxes. He's going out there and doing everything that he needs to do to get the win. But now is the stiffest test for him. And this is where we see, like, if he passes this test with flying colors, I'll be sold on the kid, man. I think that he will really have a lot of success in the heavyweight division if he beats a guy like Alexander Volkov. Because, again, Francis Ngannou is still making improvements on a fight-to-fight basis. But I feel like Gane has the advantage in that fight if they were to be matched up together, especially if this comes down to a 5-round fight. If he doesn't get dusted in the first round and a half by Francis, he probably runs away with it. But again, we're talking about a little bit into the future here. I think Gane wins this fight. I think he is the real deal. Now he has to go out there this weekend and showcase that he's the real deal. So I like Gane, especially around -150. I think that's a solid spot. And then I also like Gane via decision at +200. Jonah, how are you feeling about Volkov as a dog here? Sorry, last thing I'll say, actually, like I said a little bit earlier, this seems like another spot that people are going to be value hunting on Volkov, but will still end up ripping up their tickets. Again, I see the Volkov angle, but I still think that Gane comes out victorious here. Jonah, how do you see this one going down?
Well, I'm glad that we could finally disagree, Locke. I mean, it's been 13 fights. I feel like we've been on the same page. You're talking about people, ripping up their tickets before the fight happens. Listen, I'm on the Volkov side here. I played him at +140 earlier today. It's my last play of the week. I wasn't sure I was going to play it. To be honest, there was a +150 earlier in the week. I know he kind of got up there, got bet down. It was going back up. I kind of timed my market entry midday through the afternoon earlier today. I think a lot of your points with the breakdown of the fight were great, Locke. Like, I think we view it pretty similarly. I just think there's value on the other side. And I think it's an interesting matchup because both of these guys present kind of a stylistic matchup that they haven't necessarily seen before with someone as good as them. Because I do think that Gane is the real deal. Like, I do think he has a title ceiling in this weight class. I mean, anybody who's as well-rounded as he is in a division at like heavyweight has a real chance to win the title. And, there's some things working against him. I will say I don't think he's going to be a great finisher. I know he's finished 3 of his 5 UFC wins. And this is purely eye test based off my gut instinct. I think when he starts fighting higher level guys, he's going to struggle to have a ton of finishing equity. And I don't just say that because of the Jairzinho fight. I understand Rosenstrike is a guy you have to be somewhat careful about. And, we say he played it somewhat safe. The guy still landed a decent amount of strikes over the course of 25 minutes. He did a good job moving in and out. Regardless of what the commentary said, I thought he fought pretty smart in that fight. Where it comes down to me is that he hasn't seen someone like Volkov who is actually content to fight at that range. He loves to move in and out. Gane does, but Volkov is taller than him. I know the reach is very similar, pretty much doesn't matter when it's a 1-inch reach discrepancy, but Gane is usually much longer than his opponents, and Volkov is capable of fighting at that range. He fights behind a jab. He will teep up the middle. He'll throw front kicks as well. Volkov he's been around. He's a bona fide top 5 heavyweight. He's fought in the best promotions in the world. He is still in his physical prime at 32. I just think Volkov is generally underrated. And you mentioned in the Blades fight how he was taken down 14 times. I do think Gane has some wrestling upside here, which is why I'll pick him, why I think he deserves to be the favorite. It's just one of those things, like, in order to take down somebody 14 times, they have to get up. And Volkov has a decent get-up game, and I haven't seen things from Gane that make me think, he's going to be able to hold down Volkov enough to win rounds consistently via that method. And to me, the striking feels competitive. I actually think Volkov hits harder. If they were to get in the pocket, I would favor him in sort of a firefight here, although I tend to think it's going to be mostly on the outside, and I think it plays out closely. You give me 42% implied on a guy like Volkov. Prove it to me, Serial Gane. Prove to me that you're a top 5 guy in this division. So it should be a really fun fight as far as heavyweight goes. I'm excited for it. I'll pick Gane, but I do think it pretty much a coin flip, and I'll take the dog.
I like that breakdown. Definitely a good way to approach it. And last thing I'll say before I actually move this on over to John, the argument regarding the experience and the level of competition, all that, you gotta give some leeway to Gane in terms of, like, he's at the mercy of just the progression of his career, right? He comes in, pretty much gets, I believe his first professional MMA fight was for a title over there at TKO. Like, they had high hopes for him right off the bat, so he can only take what they're giving him. He's accepting everything that they're giving him, and he's progressing at a pretty solid straight. But obviously this fight against Volkov will definitely be his toughest to date. John, how are you feeling about this matchup? You like the dog, or do you think that the up-and-comer shines bright this weekend?
Early on in the week, I kind of thought the value was on Volkov, but after rewatching a few of Gane's fights, I'm going to be siding with Gane. And I think, especially after he dropped under -150, is he still hovering around there? I was pretty shocked. Right after the weigh-ins, like, a lot of money came in on Volkov, and I was pretty shocked to see Gane at -137 there for a short amount of time. I think the biggest difference in this fight is just going to be the speed difference. Is Gane is just going to be so much faster, and he's going to be staying on the outside with his leg kicks, his body kicks. I mean, what a unique fighting style, especially for heavyweight, where we just see guys swing to the death most of the time. I mean, Gane doesn't really throw that many head strikes. He's content to stay on the outside, chew your legs up, chew your body up, and he's got great cardio, great output. One thing that really impressed me in the Rosenstrike fight is how he just steadily turned up the pace. He was throwing and landing more strikes every single round, and he proved that he can strike with another good striker for 5 full rounds. Now, Volkov doesn't exactly have bad cardio. He knocked out Verdum late. He rallied late against Blades, but he doesn't have that same level of proven cardio where he can throw 5 rounds of striking output like we know Gane can. And I think Volkov is going to compete in the first two or three rounds. But rounds 4 and 5, I think Gane's leg kicks are really going to start limiting Volkov's mobility. The gas tank is going to start depleting from those body shots, and Gane's really going to take over rounds 4 and 5. But the one thing I will say is Gane really hasn't been caught too much in his MMA career. He's got great defense, and Volkov has got real good power now. Now that he's bulked up to 265, he's finished both of his opponents doing so. And I think there's a chance that if Volkov hits Gane, we might see Gane in a little bit of trouble. We might see Gane hit harder than he's been hit in his MMA career before. So I don't think you can write off that early finish from Volkov in 1, 2, or 3. But if Gane is able to survive and make it into the later rounds, I do favor his athleticism, his leg work, his attritional work as the fight goes. And I think he's probably going to win a pretty comfortable decision here. I'm going to go with 49-46 for Cyril Gane. And as Jonah said, heavyweight main events are typically terrible. I usually rant all the time about how they're a waste of time.
Yeah.
But this is one of the rare good ones. Yeah. One of the rare fights where I think that it actually has potential to go in rounds 4 and 5, unlike some of these heavyweight fights that end by knockout in the first 1 or 2 rounds, and then we're kind of wasting an entire main event spot. So this is actually a rare good choice for the heavyweight main event, and Gane decision is my pick.
I like it. I absolutely agree with you as well. One of the heavyweight main events that we had recently that goes to that point is Rosenstrike versus Sakai. We didn't need 5 fucking rounds of that. I'm sure there was another fight on the card that we could have possibly gotten a better 5 rounds out of. Wheezy, let's bring this on home, brother. Who you like in this main event between Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov?
I'm on the Volkov side here. The thing that I'm seeing here on the Volkov side is Cyril Gane's got 8 professional fights. Volkov's got 41. Okay, 82 minutes of professional cage time for Cyril Gane. Alexander Volkov, 358 minutes of cage time.
Jesus.
We talk about the career length. The mixed martial arts career of Cyril Gane has been less than 3 years, while Alexander Volkov has been in there fighting since he was 19. 12 years, 2 months, 26 days. And then we add all that up, all that experience edge that Volkov has, and Volkov's 32 and Gane's 31. Okay, there's a big experience advantage here for Volkov, and he has fought by far the better competition. Now let's get into the numbers, because there are some things that are on the Gane side that are really fucking impressive. One of them is that Gane is landing 5.04 significant strikes per minute and only absorbing 1.85. He's almost hitting his opponents 3 times for every 1 time they hit him. But if we look at Volkov, we see 5.35 significant strikes landed per minute, and he only absorbs 2.68. So he's actually hitting his opponents twice as much as they're hitting him. It's very impressive. The number that jumps off the page, though, Cyril Gane thus far in his 5 UFC fights has 70% striking defense. Man, that's really good. So, obviously it's going to be difficult for Volkov to find this guy. He's going to have to chase him around that small cage. He's going to have to try to march him down. He's going to have to pressure him a hell of a lot more than Rosenstrike pressured him. People think that Gane's going to take down Volkov. I don't see him taking down Volkov. Volkov's takedown percentage in the UFC is 66%, but if you throw out the Blades fight, it's over 83%. So, this is a guy you kind of just throw out the Blades stats because he's the elite wrestler in the heavyweight division, and he's going to take you down. Now, the thing that's really impressive about Volkov is he's had 9 fights, only 10 takedown attempts, but he's gotten 7 of them. So I think there are people who think that Gane's going to take down Volkov. I think it's the other way around. I think Volkov is more likely to take down Gane. Gane has only had 3 takedowns attempted against him in the UFC. So, Volkov isn't going to shoot for a lot of takedowns, but he might be able to get 1 or 2. And if he does get 1 or 2, he might be able to steal a round or 2. And then also, I think that the eye test is maybe going to see Gane kind of running and circling a lot more, and maybe Volkov a little bit more pressuring. He might be bringing the action a little bit more. I'm actually going to go with Volkov by decision here. I think there's just too massive of an experience advantage for Volkov. There's too massive of a high-level competition that Volkov has fought against. And I think this is a huge step up for Gane, and we just don't know how he's going to look against a stud like Volkov. So I bet the money line on Volkov. I got him at plus 140 earlier in the week. I think there's value there. I think Gane could easily win this fight, but I'm going to pick Alexander Volkov by decision.
I like it. Between that fight and Timur Valiev versus Hani Barcelos, I'm super excited for the fights that are coming up tomorrow. Once again, 1 p.m. Eastern prelim start time, 4 p.m. Eastern main card start time. And something I actually forgot to tip off to these guys before we started the stream, and I'm hoping that they're ready to actually answer this question. One thing that I like to leave the viewers with on the back end here is everybody's lock of the night play, or like most confident play of the card. Anything better than minus 250 is acceptable. So for myself, I've already gone with Charles Rosa minus 175. I think he's actually going to style on Justin Jaynes in this spot. My second pick would have been the under 2.5 and Hanato Moicano versus Jay Herbert. Jonah, what's your most confident play of the card tomorrow night?
Yes. So my biggest play is on the first fight of the night, actually, Hadzovic, Yancy Medeiros under 2.5 at plus 150. That's moved like the even range, which I think it's decent. I wouldn't bet it myself probably at that number, but I'll say now at this point in the week with the current available odds, I think the Moicano under is still pretty good at minus 140. I have 6 plays. That first one I mentioned was for a unit and a half. The rest are just 1 unit. So technically I like them all the same in terms of like wagering, but I feel confident in that Moicano read. I think we see a finish in Herbert Moicano.
I like it. John, what's your lock of the night play for UFC Vegas 30?
Yeah, I wouldn't have any that I classified it as that. I guess the closest thing that I would say is a lock is the Moicano money line, but my most confident bets are going to be Tim Means money line and Danilo Marques money line.
All right, I like it. And Weezy, what do you got for us? What's your most confident play of the card?
Definitely that Moicano money line. I really like him here to take down Herbert and finish him quickly. I also love the under in the Moicano Herbert fight, and I like that under in the Prachnio Villanueva fight. I think somebody's getting slept there, man. I think that's a really good bet, and there's some decent value there. But if I had to make one bet and just guarantee it, it would be Moicano money line.
I like it. I love it. All right. Last thing I'm going to do, then we'll get these guys out of here. I want to let them plug themselves because you guys have already seen that they have the chops. They know what the fuck they're talking about, and they are sharp dudes. So please do give them a follow. Like I said, the Twitter links are in the description below. But Jonah, I'll let you kick it off. Where can people find your stuff? Please plug away as you please.
Yeah, thank you, Locke, for having me. You can find me at Twitter, on Twitter, at JShiffyDFS. It's right there on the stream right now. I do work at ftndaily.com for DFS, ftnbets.com for betting. You can listen to my podcast with John Kelly, who was the funny-looking, not-so-sharp guy on the show last week. That's called The Undisputed MMA Show. Find it on iTunes, Spotify, all that good stuff. But that's enough plugging for me. Thanks again for having me on, Locke. It was a fun time chopping it up with all of you guys, and I'm looking forward to the card tomorrow.
Shout out to Owly last week for the comment of the week, calling John Kelly unjuiced TJ Dillashaw, and I can't unsee it anymore. John, where can people find you at? And especially, please plug your podcast.
Yeah, so my Twitter is UFO_UFC, and you can watch the Martian MMA podcast on YouTube, SoundCloud, and Apple Podcasts. I typically record every Friday about 24 hours before the event starts and break down the card in about 30 minutes every single time. And thanks for Locke having me on. It's finally nice to meet Jonah face-to-face, and it's nice to meet Weezy too as well. So thank you all for having me. Thanks for everyone for listening too.
I see you, John Kelly, in the chat. I'm glad that you're able to hear those insults right to your face. Weezy, where can people find you at, brother?
All right, man. You can find me every Sunday, well, almost every Sunday night on Pub Sports Radio. I do a show with my guy DFS by the Numbers called Stat Diggers. We go live at 7:15 Eastern every Sunday before a Saturday card, so we won't be on this week. You can also find me on DFS by the Numbers YouTube channel where we do balls deep breakdowns on the main event and sometimes the co-main event of every card. And then you can also find me on my channel on YouTube, which is Uncle Weezy, where I do the balls deep breakdown franchise there. I'll go balls deep into like 3 or 4 different fights every single week and do like a 20 to 25 minute breakdown on the fights that I do that I do analyze. I mean, I guess anywhere on the internet where you find dudes going balls deep on MMA knowledge, you're going to find your Uncle Weezy there. So that's where you can find me. Also, one other thing, in about a half an hour, it's going to be my guy DFS by the numbers birthday.
Oh,
wish that dude a happy birthday. He's a great guy. He's been an inspiration to me. So have you, Locke, Jay Schiffy, and Mr. Martian. Man, it was great hanging out with you guys. Thanks for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Uncle Weezy is climbing up the ranks quickly. The guy knows what he's talking about, and I'm happy to have him on. And obviously, Jonah, as well as my guy, John. 2.5 hours, definitely longer than I was expecting it to be. So I definitely appreciate all these guys carving out a Friday night to hang out with us and give you guys some knowledge and hopefully get some green indie cash tomorrow evening and afternoon, I should say. Remember, 1 p.m. Eastern prelim start time. Appreciate everybody joining the show. As always, no show next week, but I promise I'm coming back with a banger for UFC 264. I have a great lineup set up for the Ultimate Wayne show. Just waiting on one more motherfucker to confirm, and then I'll drop the news for you guys. But I promise you guys will be very, very happy with who I'm going to be bringing to the table. Good luck on your bets tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon, I should say. I keep fucking it up. Good luck on your bets tomorrow afternoon, and I appreciate you guys joining us. Give me a like, throw them a follow, and you guys will be well on your way to getting some more bank in that bankroll. All right, peace out, guys.